Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories from the wizarding world. The paths canon never walked, the choices that might have changed everything. Here, we take a single moment and turn it slightly. We follow the consequences slowly, carefully, year by year. If you enjoy these long, immersive journeys into alternate magic, consider subscribing and settling in. Now, let's start. The forest edge is breathing. Night presses in on the ragged line where Hogwarts grounds dissolve into the forbidden forest, and the air around the Thestrals is damp with mist and the aftertaste of battle. Harry stands there, long after he should have gone back inside. His hands are clenched in the coarse mane of a creature the others still insist isn't real. Sirius is gone. The Ministry is spinning. The prophecy is ringing in his ears, and Harry Potter is alone. Except he isn't. A soft crunch of leaves, a faint rustle of radish earrings against hair, and Luna Lovegood steps into the moonlight as if she's been walking this path her whole life. She doesn't say hello. She doesn't ask if he's all right. She just reaches out, calm and steady, to stroke the bony neck of the same invisible horse. "You're not broken, Harry," she says, voice low enough that even the trees have to lean in to hear. "You're just one of the few who can see what's really there." In canon, this is a quiet comfort scene, a strange girl meeting a grieving boy at the edge of the dark. Harry listens, nods, swallows his tears, and walks away with his grief still locked behind his ribs. Means he goes back to the castle, carrying a weight no one is allowed to hold. But what if this moment didn't end with Harry turning away? What if, on this one night, the Chosen One didn't choose silence? What if instead of blinking back the tears, he let them fall in front of the girl everyone calls Loony, and discovered she was the one person who didn't flinch from his pain? Imagine the scene freezing right here. Harry's throat burning, eyes glassy, Luna's gaze unwavering. A Thestral shifts beside them, skeletal wings rustling, as if waiting to see what he'll do. This isn't a story about a quirky side character cheering him up and then fading into the background. This changes everything, because if Harry lets himself cry here, if he lets Luna hold the part of him that watched Sirius disappear through the veil, then the entire emotional timeline of the war starts to bend. Who he trusts, who he leans on in Dumbledore's army, who he reaches for in the Department of Mysteries when the shelves are crashing and the prophecy is shattering, who he listens to when Horcruxes and Hallows and death itself crowd his future. One choice at the forest's edge means he doesn't just find comfort, he begins to fall in love. With the girl who believes in Nargles more than fame, who can see Thestrals and the shape of his grief, who will stand beside him at the Battle of Hogwarts and refuse to let him walk to his death alone. So, let's explore how we get here. In this video, we're going to rewind from this frozen breath in the dark and rebuild the path that leads Harry to Luna's side, reworking their early meetings, shifting tiny loyalties, and tracing how a strange, fragile friendship could grow into a battle-tested romance that quietly, steadily reshapes the ending of the story. Defining the divergence. When does Harry start seeing Luna? We've seen Harry and Luna standing together at the edge of death. To understand how he gets to that breathless choice in the forest, we have to rewind to something smaller, quieter, a boy on a train and a girl reading the Quibbler upside down. Canon gives us that scene almost as a joke. Luna with her radish earrings, Ron sniggering, Hermione bristling, Ginny apologetic. Harry is exhausted, angry, and already bracing himself for another year of being the Chosen One, before the title even exists. In the original timeline, he files Luna under odd but kind and moves on. But because this is a different story, we let him hesitate. We let him really look at her. What if the key divergence isn't a grand prophecy or a new spell, but a single, extended conversation in that rattling compartment on the Hogwarts Express, in Order of the Phoenix? What if instead of tuning Luna out, Harry actually asks why she can see the Thestrals too? Means he hears, right then, that she watched her mother die. Means he recognizes the same hollow place he carries for Cedric, for parents he never knew. This isn't a story about Harry instantly falling in love with the dreamy Ravenclaw who believes in Nargles. It's about attention, about who he lets close when he is at his most breakable. Canon Harry's romantic path runs through Cho's fragile grief in 5th year, and Ginny's fiery confidence in 6th. Cho mirrors his trauma but can't bear the weight of his anger. Ginny offers heat, normalcy, and the thrill of being wanted. Both are real, both are valid, but both are brief. In this timeline, Luna's role quietly expands. Harry still asks her to join Dumbledore's army, still trusts her enough to bring her into the Department of Mysteries. But we amplify what is already there. After Sirius falls through the veil, who does he meet by the Thestrals? Not just a comforting presence who tells him, "We'll see them again," but the one person he finally lets see him sobbing, incoherent, furious at the world. So, let's explore what happens when that night becomes the moment he emotionally imprints on her, instead of shutting down. We are not sanding off Luna's edges. She is still dreamy, still blunt to the point of discomfort, still the girl everyone dismisses as loony. This changes everything not because she becomes conventionally grounded, but because Harry learns to ground himself around her. Her unwavering belief, both in impossible creatures and in him, becomes the steady thread through his 5th and 6th years, the thing he clings to when the prophecy, Umbridge, and Dumbledore's secrets make him feel unlovable. By the time canon would have nudged him toward Ginny, our Harry is already turning almost unconsciously toward Luna, looking for her at meals, seeking her out after nightmares, noticing that the girl everyone laughs at is the only one who never laughs at him. So if the one person who truly understands his pain is the girl the rest of Hogwarts dismisses, what happens when, step by step, he chooses her instead? Not a fairy tale fix, ground rules for Harry Luna. So before we start pairing Harry and Luna off in our heads and changing Patronuses, we need to say this plainly. This isn't a sugar-coated fantasy where Luna fixes Harry. This isn't a story about a quirky girl curing a boy's trauma with whimsical wisdom and radish earrings. Harry is still a Horcrux. He is still carrying Voldemort's soul, temper, and nightmares in his own mind and body. That means the anger in Order of the Phoenix doesn't vanish because Luna holds his hand by the Thestrals. He still shouts, still pushes people away, still feels used by Dumbledore and trapped by prophecy. Luna doesn't erase that. She stands near it, and she brings her own scars into the room. A mother killed in a magical accident, years of stolen shoes, and a childhood of being laughed at in corridors. Falling in love doesn't make her less lonely overnight. It just means someone finally sees that loneliness and doesn't flinch. We also have to put real-world weight on their circumstances. Luna is socially marginalized. Luna Lovegood isn't a cute nickname when you're the girl no one wants to sit beside on the train. Xenophilius is the man who prints crumple-horned snorkax and conspiracy theories. Harry is the chosen one, the boy who lived, the face of the war. This changes everything about how people read their relationship. Is she using him for attention? Is he having a breakdown and clinging to the weird girl? The Daily Prophet would have a field day. And from Voldemort's side, it's worse. The girl who can see Thestrals, who was at the Department of Mysteries, who stands beside Harry in the Battle of Hogwarts, making her Harry's known weak point means she becomes a strategic target. Luna's abduction from the Hogwarts Express becomes even more chilling because it's not just leverage against Xenophilius. It's leverage against Harry. Their choice to be together also ripples through everyone we already care about. Ginny doesn't get quietly benched as the one who lost the boy. She has to renegotiate who she is without the future she thought she was headed toward. And that's painful but honest. Cho's grief over Cedric, already tangled with Harry's, now has another layer of awkwardness and missed timing. Hermione and Ron, growing up as Harry's family in this timeline, become the people he confides in about Luna, which means they carry their own discomfort, misreadings, and eventual acceptance. So, let's explore this romance while keeping canon's spine intact. Death still comes, war still costs, Harry still has to walk into the forest and choose to die. But because he loves Luna, the way he looks at that walk changes. He isn't dying for an abstract world. He's dying for the girl who believes they'll meet behind the veil, and for the future she insists is worth protecting. The promise of this what if is balance. We'll let Harry and Luna be strange, brave, and flawed together. We won't flinch when that choice makes the story harder as well as softer. And in the next section, we'll step into specific moments. Thestrals, the veil, the DA, where that fragile, complicated love actually starts. Who is Harry without Ginny? Reframing his heart. To understand that love, we have to ask a quieter, sharper question. Who is Harry when Ginny isn't the girl he falls for? What if the center of his romantic world is the Ravenclaw on the fringes, not the chaser in the spotlight? In canon, Harry's attraction to Ginny grows out of familiarity and fire. She's funny in the same rhythm as the twins. She teases him about being the chosen one, and then scores 3 goals in a match he's watching from detention. Their bond is rooted in Quidditch adrenaline, shared jokes at the Gryffindor table, and the ease of someone who has been in his family kitchen since he was 11. This isn't a story about dismissing that connection. It's about asking what changes when the magnetic pull shifts. Because when Harry is drawn instead to Luna, he isn't reaching for comfort inside his existing circle. He's reaching outward to the girl reading the Quibbler upside down, to the only other student who can see Thestrals and doesn't flinch. Means he isn't choosing the girl who fits. He's choosing the girl who doesn't. Her radical honesty cuts through his carefully managed image. She'll say, "You're not going mad." I can see them too, in a corridor where everyone else averts their eyes. Being loved by someone who genuinely doesn't care about fame or normalcy shifts his self-concept. Ginny understands fame from the splash page of the chamber, but she also enjoys the roar of the stadium. Luna, by contrast, will happily wear a lion hat that roars off beat, and then wander away before the final whistle. To her, Harry isn't a heroic sports star or a headline. He's a boy who has seen people die. A boy who clenches his jaw when someone mentions the Department of Mysteries. What does it do to him when the person he loves most refuses to translate his pain into legend? Her acceptance is non-judgmental in a way Harry almost doesn't know how to receive. After Sirius falls through the veil, Canon Luna is the one who talks about seeing her mother again. In this timeline, that conversation isn't a gentle epilogue to grief. It's the beginning of Harry letting himself unravel in front of her. She listens without flinching when he rages. She tells him that being angry doesn't make him bad. Over time, that softens his temper, blunts the edge of his self-loathing. But because Luna won't see the world purely in tactical terms, because she'll suggest talking to the house elves when he's planning a battle, it also frustrates him. How do you argue strategy with someone who keeps asking what the plan does to your soul? Here's the core thesis of their bond. Love with Luna pulls Harry inward and upward at the same time. Inward, deeper into his own grief because she won't let him lock the cupboard on it, upward toward a broader, more mystical understanding of death and meaning, because she treats the veil and the Thestrals and even the Hallows as part of a pattern, not just weapons or wounds. This changes everything about how he carries the prophecy. Means he isn't just a soldier, he's a pilgrim walking into the forest. So, let's explore how that Harry learns to love in the first place. To see it clearly, we have to walk back through his early encounters with Luna, the carriages, the Quidditch stands, the DA meetings, and watch, moment by moment, where the spark could realistically catch and where it almost doesn't. Luna Lovegood, reconsidered, more than loony. We start with the girl in the lion hat, humming to herself in the Quidditch stands while the rest of Hogwarts pretends she isn't there. What if, growing up as Harry Weasley, he's been trained from birth to notice the person on the margins? This isn't a story about a manic pixie dream witch drifting in to fix the chosen one with radish earrings and whimsy. Canon Luna is stranger and sharper than that. Her dreamy speech patterns, the way she drifts in and out of conversations, make people underestimate her. But because she doesn't bother with social varnish, her honesty lands with a quiet seismic force. When she tells Harry in the hospital wing that Voldemort will want him to feel alone, she isn't guessing. She's reading him with startling emotional intelligence. Underneath the Spectre Specs and the Quibbler, she is fiercely loyal. She joins the DA when almost no one believes Harry, stands by him at the Department of Mysteries, and is one of the few who never treats his temper in 5th year as a moral failing. Means she sees the difference between a boy being difficult and a boy drowning. But to understand why she can do that, we have to look at her own wounds. Luna's mother dies in front of her, in a magical experiment gone wrong. She grows up with a father who loves her, but in a house steeped in grief and conspiracy, and whispered what-ifs. At Hogwarts, her possessions are stolen, her shoes hidden, Loony scratched into walls, and she endures it with this almost eerie calm, not because it doesn't hurt, but because she has built a quiet resilience around that hurt. In another timeline, Harry might miss that. Our Harry Weasley doesn't. Growing up in a family where everyone teases but no one isolates, he recognizes that what happens to Luna isn't harmless schoolyard fun. It's exile. A mirror image of the loneliness he might have known at Privet Drive, and the loss he still carries from Godric's Hollow. Her belief in Nargles and crumple-horned Snorkax isn't just comic relief, it's architecture. It's how she holds paradox without breaking. Her mother is gone and also present in every experiment. People are cruel and also worth defending. Thestrals are terrifying and also beautiful. That worldview means she can sit with Harry by the forest and talk about Sirius's death without flinching or rushing him to be okay. Who else in canon does that for him? This changes everything when we remember Harry's life is built around prophecy, death, and the Hallows. Most people either worship him or fear him. Luna simply believes him. If he tells her about a snake in his mind, a cloak that cheats death, or a stone that brings back shades of the dead, she doesn't demand proof. She asks better questions. So, let's explore the real tension here. If Luna is this emotionally compatible with Harry, why doesn't the original timeline take them there? And what happens to the war, to the DA, to the Hallows hunt, if we let that connection become love instead of leaving it as a haunting almost? Mapping the AU, from Thestrals to Epilogue. So here's how we're going to test that almost. We're not just hand-waving a new ship into existence. We're going to walk the timeline and watch where one different choice, one different confidant, quietly tilts the war. We'll follow Harry and Luna from those early, awkward Hogwarts crossings of paths, through the Thestrals in the Forbidden Forest, into the cramped, buzzing room of Dumbledore's army, down the echoing corridors of the Department of Mysteries, and all the way to a reimagined post-war epilogue. This isn't a story about replacing Ginny with a quirky blonde and calling it a day. This is a story about how a different kind of love reframes what Harry thinks he's for. So, let's explore the key pressure points. We start with the Thestral scene, two teenagers who can see death made visible when no one else can. In canon, it's a moment of eerie empathy. Here, we'll lean in until it becomes the first time Harry actually says, out loud, "I feel broken." And Luna doesn't flinch. Means he starts building an emotional refuge with her, long before he ever kisses anyone. This changes everything about who he runs to when the visions get worse. Then we move into the DA meetings, same room of requirement, same clandestine lessons, but because Luna is not just a supporter, but Harry's chosen confidant, she's in the room when he decides what to teach, how hard to push, when to stop before he burns himself out. We'll watch her nudge him toward delegating, toward trusting Neville and Ginny and the others, not because she's ambitious, but because she wants him alive at the end of this story. At the Ministry battle and the Veil, the romantic lens sharpens everything. Canon Harry chases Sirius with reckless grief. Our Harry has Luna's hand on his sleeve in the corridor, her voice in his ear at the archway. We'll see how fighting for each other's lives, not just for prophecy, alters who gets stunned, who gets cursed, and how Harry survives the aftermath. From there, we'll trace Dumbledore's death, the Horcrux hunt, the forest walk, and the Battle of Hogwarts with Luna woven into every strategic decision. She's in the tent when Hallows versus Horcruxes comes up, which means the conversation is not just Harry and Hermione circling logic, but someone who asks very calmly, what if the point isn't winning, but ending this well? That tiny shift in emphasis, this changes everything about how Harry meets death. We'll move back and forth between immersive scenes and analytic interludes. One moment you're in the snow outside Hogsmeade, watching them argue over whether to risk Xenophilius. The next, we're stepping out to ask, does this make Harry more or less reckless? What happens to Ginny's arc, to Neville's? And the first major deviation, it doesn't start with Thestrals at all. It starts in a hospital wing bed, long before that forest clearing, when Harry has to decide who to tell that he doesn't feel worth saving. Early echoes, rereading Harry and Luna's first meetings. So when Harry's lying in that hospital wing bed, staring at the ceiling and deciding who deserves the truth about the way his chest feels hollow, our timeline nudges his gaze in a slightly different direction. Not just toward Ron and Hermione, toward a girl he barely knows yet, who wears butterbeer corks and reads a magazine upside down. Because to understand a Harry-Luna romance, we have to go back to their first proper meeting on the Hogwarts Express, in Order of the Phoenix, and tilt the camera by a few degrees. Canon gives us a boy who is exhausted, furious, and freshly traumatized by Dementors and the Ministry's smear campaign. He's the boy who lied in The Prophet, a walking scandal. He drags his trunk down the train corridor, already braced for whispers and side-eyes. This isn't a story about quirky meet-cute energy. It starts with bone-deep alienation. In canon, he opens that compartment door and sees Neville, Ginny, and Luna. He notices the wand behind her ear, the radish earrings, the upside-down quibbler. He labels her Loony in his head because that's the story he's been handed. But because we're shifting this timeline, we let one more detail land. She doesn't flinch. She looks straight at his scar, at the boy the papers are tearing apart, and nothing in her expression changes. No awe, no suspicion, just calm, dreamy acceptance, as if she's been expecting him to sit there all along. That tiny absence of judgment hits harder when you're growing up. Weasley raised Harry, Already sensitive to fame and poverty and the way adults talk over your head, means he doesn't only clock her oddness. He clocks the fact that she's the first person on that train who doesn't seem to have decided what he is before he opens his mouth. That intrigues him more than the Quibbler does. So, let's explore the divergence. The conversation still wanders through houses and Hogwarts and the usual small talk, but when Luna mentions her mother's experimental spells, Harry doesn't let the moment pass. He's tired of people tiptoeing around death. He's tired of pretending he's fine. What happened to her? He asks quietly. In canon, we only hear this in fragments later. Here, Luna tells him on the train, a spell gone wrong. She saw it. It was horrible. And then, with that Luna honesty that never dramatizes and never minimizes, she says, I miss her, but I can still feel her. It's not less real because other people can't. Harry doesn't confess everything. He doesn't pour out the prophecy or the Dementors or the cupboard under the stairs, but he does say, I don't remember mine. I wish I did. It hangs there, an awkward, raw truth. Luna just nods. That must hurt in a different way. No advice, no platitudes, just naming the pain. This changes everything. It means that when Umbridge carves his hand open and the DA forms, Luna isn't just the odd girl he invited along. She's quietly filed under people who understand loss without making it about themselves. It means that when he later hears her talk about Thestrals and death, it's not abstract philosophy. It's an echo of that compartment, of being seen without being dissected. And the next time they talk about death, it won't be theoretical. It will be standing near creatures only they can see, with Sirius's name burning in Harry's throat. And the choice of who he turns to in that moment is about to shift the entire emotional spine of this story. DA, but make it intimate. Harry's teacher voice and Luna's faith. They're still talking about death when the DA really begins to belong to them. What if the room of requirement doesn't just become a training hall, but the quiet place where Harry starts to lean on Luna without realizing he's doing it? What if every spell he teaches is also, accidentally, a confession? Canon gives us those early DA meetings from Harry's point of view. Nerves, parchment, Cho's hair, Umbridge breathing down his neck. This timeline keeps all of that, but tilts the camera. Because now, every time Harry raises his wand and says, Voldemort, there's one student who doesn't flinch. Luna says the name as casually as she says Nargles. She stands near the front, head tipped, eyes steady, watching him the way the twins watch a new invention. Not worshipful, but fascinated. Harry notices. Means he notices her calm when other students glance at the door. Her soft, matter-of-fact, of course he's back. You saw him, when someone whispers doubt. He catches her eye after he demonstrates Expelliarmus, and she nods once, as if he's confirmed something she already knew about him, not about the spell. This isn't a story about Luna inflating the legend of the Chosen One. If anything, she punctures it by refusing to be impressed by the myth when the boy is standing right there, sweating through his Weasley jumper and stumbling over instructions. After a meeting where Zachariah Smith pushes too hard, where Harry's scar twinges and Umbridge's latest decree is still burning in his pocket, he snaps at everyone, ends early, storms out. In canon, that anger just simmers. Here, Luna follows. She finds him in a side corridor, fists shoved into his robes, jaw tight. I'm a fraud, he mutters before she can say anything. Half the time I don't know what I'm doing. They keep staring at me like I've got answers and I'm just guessing. Luna considers this. You're very bad at being a fraud, she says mildly. Frauds usually enjoy being admired. He huffs, not quite a laugh. You don't get it. I'm scared. I'm angry all the time. I'm not Dumbledore. I'm barely passing potions. I know you're scared, she says. I can hear it when you say his name. And I like that. He blinks. You, what? I like that you're scared and angry and you still come to teach us. It means you're real. I don't want a legend. I want Harry who gets things wrong and still shows up. That lands somewhere logic and jokes never reach. Hermione tells him what's rational. Ron tells him when he's being mental. But because Luna names the fear and doesn't try to fix it, he feels seen in the parts he usually hides. Growing up with the Weasleys taught him family love. This teaches him something adjacent and more terrifying: being known. The next Patronus lesson is different. When he walks them through the spell, his expecto patronum is rough at first. Memory wobbling, he falters, glances up, and finds Luna already looking at him, wand relaxed at her side, that same quiet faith in her expression. His stag bursts forth on the second try, brighter, surer. As it circles the room, students cheer, silver light washing over their faces. Harry's eyes go to Luna again, almost without permission. She's smiling, not at the Patronus, but at him. The glance he gives her lingers half a heartbeat too long. He doesn't have a name for the warmth in his chest yet. The audience does. This changes everything. And the next time the room shifts around them, it won't just be answering Harry's need for a place to fight. It will be answering his need for the one person who looks at his fear and calls it real, not weakness. The Thestral conversation, rewritten as a turning point. When the room of requirement finally spits them back out into the real castle, the contrast is brutal. No warm glow, no cheering DA, just cold stone corridors, Umbridge's notices fluttering, and Harry's head pounding with the afterimage of another corridor that doesn't exist here at all. The next vision hits him in defense, hard enough that his quill snaps. By the time detention ends, his hand is bleeding, his scar is burning, and the certainty has settled in his gut. Something is wrong with him, not just with his life, with him. So when he storms out onto the grounds, he isn't looking for Thestrals. He's looking for somewhere no one will ask why his eyes are wild. But because this is the fifth-year timeline, because Sirius is in constant danger, and Voldemort is in his head, what he finds instead is Luna, standing by the trees, hand outstretched to a creature most of the school insists isn't there. Canon gives us the bones of this scene. Here, the what-if is simple. What if Harry was too tired to pretend he was fine? He steps closer, watching the Thestral's skeletal flank shiver under Luna's touch. He can see every rib, every shadow he hears himself say too loudly. I wish I couldn't see them. Then, quieter, the part he never admits, I think there's something wrong with me, with my head, with what I am. This isn't a story about a boy making a dramatic speech. It's about the way his voice cracks on that last word. The way he can't meet her eyes when he adds, almost ashamed, what if I'm dangerous? What if I end up like him? She just keeps stroking the Thestral, as if Harry has said something as ordinary as complaining about homework. When she does speak, her voice is very soft. People thought I was dangerous too, after Mummy died. In canon, we only get the outline. Here, she gives him the details no one ever asked for. How the spell went wrong. How the light swallowed half the room. How she spent a week staring at the scorch mark on the ceiling, because it was the last thing her mother ever touched. How the neighbors stopped letting their children play with her. How they whispered that accidents like that don't happen to normal families, means he suddenly isn't the only one whose grief rewrote the world. Harry's stomach twists. There's a flash of protectiveness so fierce it startles him. Who would look at Luna and think she was dangerous? Who would leave her alone with that ceiling? She glances at him then, grey eyes steady. You're not dangerous, Harry. You're just closer to the edge than most people dare to look. It lands with the weight of a spell, not a curse, a naming. She isn't telling him to be brave, or to cheer up, or to be the chosen one. She is simply describing the thing that has been eating him alive and refusing to call it evil. Relief hits first, sharp and dizzying. Someone sees the same cliff inside his chest and doesn't back away. Then comes something else, slower and stranger. A warmth that doesn't feel like brotherhood, or Mum's fussing, or even Hermione's fierce faith. It feels dangerous in a different way, because it means if Luna is standing on that edge with him, he cannot afford to lose her. He walks back to the castle unsettled, not just by the brush of leathery wings against his hand, or the memory of his parents' deaths, or the echo of Voldemort in his veins. He is unsettled by the realization that there is one person who can look straight at his darkness and call it real without asking him to be less. What happens when the one person who makes the edge bearable is also the one person he suddenly can't bear to lose? The next time the corridor in his dreams opens, it won't be only Sirius on the line. Department of Mysteries, fighting for more than a prophecy. The next time the corridor opens in his mind, Harry is already half running. Sirius on the floor. Voldemort's voice. It's all there, the same as canon. But because this Harry has spent months grounding himself on Luna's quiet certainty, the panic has a new edge. He isn't just afraid of losing his godfather, he's afraid of what he'll do to himself if Luna is hurt on his account. When he insists on going to the Ministry, the DA lineup still forms around him. Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, Luna. Family, almost all of them. But Luna is the one his gaze keeps snagging on in the room of requirement. Wand already in her hand, expression dreamy and utterly steady. This isn't a story about a reckless boy dragging his friends into danger because he doesn't know how to ask adults for help. This is a boy who has finally learned what it means to be loved, and who is about to gamble that love on a vision. On the Thestrals, the air is cold and thin. Harry keeps checking that Luna's grip is firm, that she's seated properly, that the creature's wings aren't stuttering. It's objectively ridiculous. She's ridden them before. She's perfectly calm. She's the one reassuring him that they'll get there in time. He knows this, means he is also aware of every way this could go wrong. In the Hall of Prophecy, the battle fractures into shards of chaos. Spells flash, shelves topple, glass rains down. Harry sees a jet of red light heading for Neville and moves to intercept. But then, out of the corner of his eye, Luna disarms a Death Eater with a spell that sounds like a household charm, and somehow sends him spinning into a rack of orbs. It's so Luna. Odd, effective, and delivered with the same tone she'd used to comment on Naggles. Pattern interrupt in the middle of a war. He keeps tracking her. When she vanishes behind a row, his stomach drops. When she reappears, hair full of glittering dust, calmly stunning someone twice her size, there's a physical rush of relief that almost knocks him off balance. What if she doesn't come back around the corner next time? That fear sharpens him. Canon Harry is already brave and self-sacrificing. This changes everything about how he uses that bravery. He starts shouting clearer orders, pairing people deliberately, steering Luna toward cover rather than open corridors, refusing to let anyone get isolated. He doesn't chase every duel. He herds. He protects, because losing her would mean losing the one person who makes the edge bearable. In the Death Chamber, when Sirius falls through the veil, the world narrows. There's the arch, Bellatrix's laugh, Remus's arms. In the book, Harry hears distant voices. In this timeline, The voice that cuts through the roaring in his head is Luna's. Not screaming, not hysterical, just firm and close to his ear. "Harry, he's gone. You can't follow." He fights her at first. Of course he does. But her hands on his shoulders are the only solid thing in the room. Later, when the dust settles and the ministry feels suddenly too bright, his grief is double-edged. He has lost Sirius. He has also spent an hour convinced he was about to lose Luna to curses, to falling stone, to his own recklessness. So when they finally speak after the battle, this isn't a story about a boy grieving alone by a window. It's the moment when his need to keep Luna safe collides with her refusal to be anyone's protected secret. And that conversation, on the other side of the veil, is where this almost love has to choose what it wants to be next. After the veil, a different kind of breakdown. They end that first raw argument on the far side of the veil with words, but the real break happens in the dark, after the others have gone to bed. Cameron gives us Harry at a window, clenched and silent. What if, in this timeline, he walks past the window and keeps going? What if the boy who grew up in a house where you never cried where anyone could see ends up on the edge of the forest, drawn to the Thestrals because they are the only things that look as broken as he feels? He finds Luna already there, of course. Bare feet in the grass, hand resting on a skeletal neck, as if she's greeting an old friend. She doesn't startle when he steps on a twig. She just turns, tilts her head and says, very softly, "You're making the Thestrals nervous." Harry tries to make a joke. It comes out as a jagged sound that might be a laugh or might be the beginning of a sob. He says he's fine. He says he doesn't want to talk. He says Sirius's name once, and his voice just stops. This isn't a story about Luna delivering a neat little speech to patch him up. This is the moment the dam finally breaks. Because this Harry has spent 15 years being told, in 100 tiny Weasley ways, that family doesn't look away from pain. Means he has a muscle memory for safety he doesn't know how to use yet. So Luna simply steps closer. She doesn't tell him it will be all right. She doesn't say Sirius is in a better place. She just observes in that maddeningly calm way. It hurts so much you think it's going to hollow you out. And then you're afraid it won't, that you'll have to carry all of it. That's when he shatters. Words spill out in ugly, gulping bursts. How he dragged them to the Department of Mysteries. How he watched Sirius fall. How he keeps seeing the flutter of that black curtain every time he blinks. How he's terrified he'll do it again, that loving people means leading them to the edge of that veil. Luna listens, really listens. Her hand finds his forearm, light but steady, thumb moving in small, absent circles. She talks about her mother, about watching an experiment go wrong and knowing there was no spell to fix it. About standing where he is now and deciding whether that pain would make her cruel or kind. She says, "I think we see them again. Not because I need it to be true, but because the world is too full of echoes for it to be an accident." She meets his eyes and doesn't flinch at the tears, the snot, the shaking. But even if I'm wrong, we carry them in what we choose to do with the hurt. That's the bit that's our magic. Harry notices ridiculous things. The way her hair catches starlight. The coolness of her fingers against his overheated skin. The fact that she doesn't keep glancing away, doesn't try to tidy his grief into something more presentable. No one has ever watched him fall apart and simply stayed, and something shifts. It's not a lightning bolt. It's a quiet, terrifying thought. I don't want to fight the rest of this war without her. Not just without the DA, not just without Ron or Hermione or Ginny. Without Luna, standing in the wreckage, refusing to look away. He can't name it yet. He files it under gratitude, under the fierce, protective tenderness that has been growing since he first saw her feeding Thestrals alone. But because this is the night he lets her see everything, his guilt, his fear, his worst thoughts, that tenderness starts to bend towards something else. For Luna, this becomes a fixed point in her own strange timeline. The night the chosen one wept into her shoulder, and she realized his heart is not a symbol, but a very fragile, very human thing she wants to protect. This changes everything. When the war darkens, when the Hallows whisper and the Horcruxes poison, both of them will reach back to this night by the Thestrals, to the memory of bones and starlight, and a boy who finally allowed himself to be held. So, let's explore how that anchor reshapes the choices they make next. Zooming out, how shared grief rewrites Harry's arc. So when Harry finally lets himself be held by the Thestrals and by Luna, we're not just closing a scene, we're opening a fault line in his entire character arc. Because what if, from this night on, he never has to be alone with his rage again? Canon Harry walks into Half-Blood Prince carrying a bomb with no fuse. He's furious about Sirius, furious at Dumbledore, furious at himself, and with no safe place to put it, he snaps at Ron, lashes out at Dumbledore's army, smashes Dumbledore's office. His grief has nowhere to go except inward and outward in unpredictable bursts. This isn't a story about Harry suddenly becoming serene, but it is a story where that bomb has someone gently, stubbornly holding the wires. With Luna as a grief companion, Harry has a pressure valve. He can stalk down to the Thestrals' clearing after a bad occlumency lesson and find her already there, feeding them apple slices, asking in that soft, matter-of-fact way, "Is it worse tonight?" means he can say, "I hate him for dying," and not be told to be strong, or that Sirius would want him to move on. Instead, Luna might simply nod and say, "I hated my mother for a while too. It passed. The love stayed." That tiny difference, being allowed to feel the ugliest version of the truth, changes how the anger metabolizes. So, let's explore what that does to the boy who keeps being told he's a symbol. In canon, Harry bottles things until they explode. Here, he experiments, awkwardly, with telling one person the truth before it reaches detonation. He still shouts. He still throws things. But because he's had nights of sitting under the stars naming what hurts, some of that Half-Blood Prince isolation softens. He's less likely to push Ron and Hermione away completely when the Horcrux hunt is first mentioned, because he's already practiced letting one friend see the mess. That has consequences for his relationship with Dumbledore. The fury at being kept in the dark is still there. Sirius is still dead. The prophecy still burns. But Luna's presence nudges the reaction from pure rage to questioning rage. Instead of only, "You used me," we get, "Why did you think you had to?" Imagine Harry stomping out of Dumbledore's office, ready to break something, and Luna later asking, "Do you want him to be a villain? Or is it worse that he isn't?" Pattern interrupt. The narrative shifts. Harry starts interrogating the system, not just the man. There's another layer, being loved, or nearly loved, by someone who has also lost a parent reframes Harry's own dead. Luna talks about her mother as present, not gone, and about death as a different kind of journey. That doesn't erase his pain, but it means when the Hallows appear, he's not only the boy desperate to see Mum and Dad, he's the boy who has watched Luna live with absence without being consumed by it. The cloak becomes protection, not obsession. The stone becomes a temptation he can name because he's already practiced saying, "I miss them," out loud. And all of this is about to be tested. As we move into Half-Blood Prince, the war steps into the open, hormones spike, and the safety of Hogwarts phrase. What happens when jealousy brushes against this fragile bond? When Ginny laughs with Harry at breakfast? When Ron rolls his eyes at Luna one time too many? What happens when Slughorn's parties, Quidditch glory, and whispered prophecies pull Harry in different directions? The next phase of this timeline asks a harder question. Can a love born in shared grief survive the ordinary storms of growing up, while Voldemort prepares to make that grief permanent? Half-Blood Prince without the Ginny crush. So when we step into Half-Blood Prince in this timeline, the first thing that feels different isn't a dark curse or a new professor. It's breakfast. In canon, Harry's 6th-year internal monologue slowly fills up with Ginny. The way she laughs, the way she moves, the way his stomach does something inconvenient whenever she walks into the room. Here, that space gets quietly rewritten. What if instead of scanning the Gryffindor table, his eyes keep drifting to the end of Ravenclaw's? Means he notices whether Luna's earrings are beetles or butterbeer corks today. Means he realizes he's disappointed when she's not there. And he can't quite explain why. This isn't a story about Harry waking up one morning and deciding he's in love with Luna Lovegood. It's much more unsettling than that, because it sneaks up on him. He finds himself listening for her voice in the corridor. He catches a glimpse of pale hair through a crowd and feels relief before he's even registered the thought. When she misses a DA-adjacent meeting or a meal, he tells himself he's just worried about her safety. But because this Harry grew up in a house where you name what you feel, the denial doesn't sit easily. So, let's explore the first big divergence. Slughorn's party. In canon, Luna is a last-minute choice, a slightly awkward but charming solution when no one else is free. Here, Harry asks her early, on purpose. He seeks her out after a Quidditch practice, still damp and windburned, and says, almost too casually, "Luna, would you come with me to Professor Slughorn's party?" She's used to being tolerated, not chosen. Being invited by Harry Weasley Potter, the chosen one who also happens to be the son of Molly and Arthur, is something else entirely. She wonders, privately, what this will do to her father's reputation, to the Quibbler, to the way people already whisper the word loony. Her self-image has always been half armor, half wound. She smiles, but it's careful. If you're sure. People talk, you know. Harry, who has spent a lifetime watching his parents stand firm against gossip, shrugs. They already do. And he means it. Around them, the social weather shifts. Ron is baffled in the way only a brother can be. Why not a Gryffindor girl? Why not someone who doesn't discuss crumple-horned snorkax over dessert? Hermione is cautious but curious. She's seen Luna be braver and kinder than most adults, and part of her wonders if this is exactly the kind of person Harry needs. Ginny, though, that's where the friction lives. She's not the glowing center of Harry's attention anymore, and the hurt shows up as sharp jokes, as clipped answers, as a sudden interest in Dean that feels more defensive than romantic. This changes everything about their group dynamic. DA meetings have an extra layer of tension. When Ginny pairs off with Neville, when Ron watches Luna and Harry discussing Slughorn's guests as if they're strange, fascinating creatures in a zoo, and Luna herself walks into that party with a kind of floating uncertainty. Is this friendship, pity, or something she doesn't have words for yet? The answer might arrive in a single dance, or in a single too honest conversation under Slughorn's fairy lights, one that neither of them is ready for, and that the war absolutely does not have room to forgive. Slughorn's party. The first almost confession, so we drop into Slughorn's party. At the exact moment Harry makes a decision, canon keeps half hidden. He doesn't scrape the bottom of the barrel and pull Luna's name out of pity. He reaches for her because the very thought of an evening of flattery and fake laughter makes his skin crawl, and Luna is the one person who makes crowded rooms feel honest. What if that choice is the first quiet rebellion of the night? In this timeline, Harry Weasley has grown up wading through ministry handshakes and Daily Prophet headlines. Means he knows the taste of being used. So when he spots Luna in the common room, humming to herself and mending a necklace of butterbeer corks, he hesitates, not because he's embarrassed, but because this matters. "Luna," he says, and his voice comes out rougher than he expects. "There's this party, Slughorn's. I was wondering if you'd come with me?" No explanation, no apology. Just the question. She blinks, wide-eyed, as if he's offered her the moon and she's checking for strings. This isn't a story about the manic pixie girl who doesn't know she's beautiful. This is a girl who's been laughed at in corridors, whose belongings have gone missing more times than she can count. So, her first words are not yes. There, very softly, is this to make someone else jealous? That lands, because Harry knows exactly who someone else could be. Ginny, Cho, the nebulous crowd that thinks the chosen one's love life is public property. He flushes, shakes his head fast. "No, I just want you there, with me." She studies him for a beat too long. Then she smiles, small and luminous. "All right," she says, "I'd like that." But because she's Luna, there's still a faint line between her brows, an old bruise of doubt that doesn't vanish just because Harry means it. At the party, that doubt meets Slughorn's syrupy charm. The room glows with golden lamps and floating candles. Bottles clink, famous names swirl. Slughorn booms about "my Harry" and talent, and destiny, and Harry feels his shoulders inch toward his ears. Luna, in silver robes that look slightly wrong for the season, and completely right for her, tilts her head. "It's interesting," she says to Slughorn, "how you collect people the way some wizards collect shrunken heads. Do you keep them on a shelf in your mind?" The conversation freezes. Slughorn splutters, half offended, half amused. Harry chokes on a laugh, real, helpless, grateful. It cuts through the performance. This changes everything about how he experiences that room. For a moment, he's not a specimen. He's a boy standing next to the only person who will say the quiet part out loud. They drift to the balcony under the pretense of fresh air. Really, they're fleeing. Snow hangs in the night, caught in the enchanted warmth. The music fades to a thrum behind them. "Thanks," Harry says, leaning on the railing. "For the shrunken heads thing." Luna shrugs, her breath fogging. "People should know when they're being collected. It's only fair." Then, after a pause, "You were very brave to ask me here." He huffs. "Brave? Most people don't want to be seen with me," she says, matter of fact. They're afraid it will spread. That hits harder than any curse. Harry turns fully toward her. "Luna, he wants to say you matter to me in ways I don't understand yet. He wants to say when everything feels heavy, you make it lighter. He wants to say love, but the word is too big too soon. I. The door bangs open. Dumbledore steps onto the balcony, face grave, summoning Harry with a few quiet words about reports. Attacks, things that cannot wait. War shoves its way between them again. Later, after the party dissolves into whispers of Death Eaters and vanished guests, Luna walks back to Ravenclaw Tower alone. In the corridor where they parted, she pauses, touching the back of her hand where Harry's fingers had closed around it, for a heartbeat when Dumbledore called him away. Did she imagine that warmth in a castle full of ghosts and prophecies? She honestly doesn't know. But because the timeline is bending, she closes her fingers over that spot as if she could protect it and keeps walking. Jealousy. But sideways, Ginny, Cho, and Hermione react. Ginny's the first one who really sees it, not the hand-holding or some grand confession. The way his gaze tracks Luna across the Great Hall, lingering when she's not doing anything dramatic at all, just stirring her porridge, humming at her own thoughts, quill stuck behind one ear. Ginny had always assumed the private jokes, the shared Chudley Cannon's commentary, the way Harry's eyes lit up when she scored, meant the story was quietly bending toward them. What if it isn't? This isn't a story about villainizing Ginny Weasley. Growing up in this timeline with Harry as family, she's braver and more open, but that also means she's more exposed. So when she catches him half listening to her Quidditch rant, fully listening to Luna describe creatures no textbook admits exist, there's a flash of hurt pride. Didn't he get that she'd been building herself into someone worthy of the boy who lived and the brother she teased at the breakfast table? Now she's standing between those roles, wondering when the ground shifted. Then there's Cho. Canon positioned her as Harry's first real crush colliding head-on with grief. Here, Harry walks into that relationship already learning to name his own darkness, because Luna has stood with him by the Thestrals and the Veil. This changes everything. Means he's less baffled when Cho cries, less impatient with the way grief spirals. But because Luna has been the one to sit in silence with him, he's also more honest. He can say gently, "I don't think I can be what you need," instead of just disappearing into awkwardness and guilt. Hermione's reaction is more complicated. On parchment, she would have predicted Harry ending up with someone dependable, organized, someone who makes revision schedules, someone, if she's honest, closer to herself. So when she realizes Harry is falling for the girl who wears Spectre specs and talks about Nargles, she's baffled. Is this really compatible? Ron voices it first over a plate of mashed potatoes. "Harry, mate, you know she was reading the Quibbler upside down at breakfast, right?" Pattern interrupt. Watch Hermione watch Luna. She sees the way Luna listens when Harry talks about nightmares, never flinching, never fixing, just accepting. She sees Luna's hand brush his when he's white-faced after a vision, grounding him without demanding an explanation. And she realizes something sharp and humbling. Luna gives Harry a kind of unflinching acceptance of his darkness that neither she nor Ron can. They argue with him, strategize, drag him back to homework. Luna stands at the edge of the abyss and says, "I see it too." At first, he's comic relief bewilderment, asking all the blunt questions the audience is thinking. What do you two even talk about? Do you have categories? But because he's grown up with Harry as his brother, he can't ignore the obvious. Harry laughs more now. He sleeps a bit better. He comes back from occlumency with Snape less brittle when Luna's waiting on the stairs. Slowly, Ron stops treating it as a punchline and starts defending it. She makes him less miserable, he mutters to Hermione after Luna wanders off, pockets full of dirigible plum seeds. That's got to count for something. And under all this is a quiet reassurance. This isn't a story about erasing Ginny, Cho, or Hermione's worth. It's a what-if that asks, what happens when the chosen one's heart is drawn toward the person who understands his pain most deeply? The girls he doesn't end up with are not failures. They are necessary witnesses in a different love story, one that will change how Harry faces the war that's still coming. Dumbledore's death with Luna in the picture. So when we reach the astronomy tower, this isn't a story about changing the lightning strike. Dumbledore still drinks the potion. The dark mark still hangs in the sky. Snape still casts the killing curse. But because Harry has Luna in his orbit now, the moments just before and just after that green flash feel very different. Picture the lead-up at the Burrow and in Hogwarts. Harry is restless, pacing, knowing Dumbledore is about to take him away again into secrets and danger. Ron is fidgeting. Hermione is interrogating the plan. And Luna? Luna just watches him, head tilted, as if she's seeing the current of fear underneath his Gryffindor bravado. When Dumbledore appears and calls Harry, there's that familiar jolt of duty. In canon, Harry goes up to the tower with adrenaline and half-formed questions. Here, on the way out of the common room, Luna steps into his path. She doesn't make a speech. She simply presses something into his hand, a tiny folded scrap of parchment with a doodled Thestral, and says, very softly, "You always come back, Harry Weasley. Don't forget you're not doing this alone." Means he walks to Dumbledore already tethered to someone who sees him. Not just the mission. The tower itself, the beats stay. Harry is frozen under the invisibility cloak, helpless. He watches Dumbledore beg, sees Snape's face, hears that terrible rush of Avada Kedavra. This changes everything about Harry's trust in his mentor, but not the raw fact of loss. The difference is what waits for him on the other side of that grief. At the funeral, Harry is numb in a way that feels almost familiar. The same blankness he had after Sirius, after Cedric, after his parents' deaths were explained to him as a child. Growing up with the Weasleys means he isn't alone on the benches. Molly's hand is on his shoulder. Ron is a solid presence. But their comfort can't quite reach the place where Dumbledore used to be, so he slips away. Of course he does. Down to the lake, away from the rows of chairs and the murmured hymns, to stare at the water and wonder if he's about to break the family that finally chose him by walking into a war he might not survive. Luna finds him there. Not because she followed him, she says, but because people who are about to do something very brave feel louder. She sits beside him without asking. Shoes off, toes in the grass, as if this is any other afternoon. She doesn't defend Dumbledore's secrets. When Harry spits out that he's tired of being steered, of being lied to, Luna just nods. It hurts when people you love don't trust you with their whole story, she says. But it doesn't mean their story is finished. Death doesn't end a person, Harry. It just moves them somewhere you can't see yet. He thinks of the veil, of Thestrals, of the way Luna talked about her mother. What if Dumbledore isn't a perfect general whose plan has collapsed, but a flawed, stubborn man whose work he can still finish? Luna doesn't tell him to be strong. She tells him that going after Horcruxes is not replacing Dumbledore. It's honoring the part of Dumbledore that believed Harry could choose. "You're very good at loving people," she says, as if it's an observable fact, not a compliment. That's why Voldemort is afraid of you. Means he makes his decision there, not in some abstract, heroic vacuum, but in the quiet beside a girl who can see death and isn't afraid to name it. He will hunt Horcruxes. He will leave the burrow, leave Hogwarts, walk into the dark, but because Luna is sitting inches away, knees brushing his, he adds a second, fiercer promise under his breath. "I will come back. To Mum and Dad. To Ron. To her." At the funeral, when Fawkes's Phoenix song rises over the gathered crowd, Harry feels the weight of that promise in his chest. He stands between Ron and Ginny, Weasley red on both sides, and Luna just behind his shoulder. As the song swells, a breeze ripples through the chairs. Harry's hand drifts back on the seat edge. Luna's fingers brush his. They don't look at each other. They don't have to. In that small, wordless contact, grief and resolve braid together. The boy who once would have walked alone into death now anchors himself to one impossible, fragile hope that there will be a future where he and Luna can talk about this day as something finished, not bleeding. Because here's the real shift in this timeline. Harry isn't just fighting for a world without Voldemort. He's fighting for the chance to sit beside Luna on the other side of the war and ask, very quietly, if she still believes he always comes back. And the next choice he makes, with Ron and Hermione on that Hogwarts lawn, will show just how much that promise is already steering him. Analytical pause. Love as anchor versus distraction. So, here's the uncomfortable question sitting under that quiet promise on the Hogwarts lawn. Does falling in love with Luna actually help Harry win this war? Or does it make him easier to break? This isn't a story about pausing the Horcrux hunt for meadow picnics and Nagel spotting dates. The mission still exists. Voldemort is still out there, but because Harry has Luna's hand to reach for in the dark now, the emotional math of the quest changes. In canon, his recklessness is fueled by a belief that his own life is expendable. Here, every suicidal impulse has to pass through a single stubborn filter. If I die, I'm leaving her. That doesn't erase his willingness to sacrifice. It just means he has to think first. Would romance distract him? It could. There's a version of this timeline where Harry obsesses over Luna's safety, where every vision of Voldemort becomes a panic spiral about her being taken. But Luna is not that kind of anchor. She's the girl who calmly told him in 5th year that the people we love never really leave us, standing in front of the Thestrals with her shoes missing and her grief worn openly, means he falls for someone whose entire worldview is built on letting go, not clinging. Luna would never ask Harry to abandon the mission. She believes too deeply in protecting people who are laughed at and overlooked. What she will question is the script where Harry's death is the only acceptable ending. She's the one who tilts her head and says, "You keep talking as if you're not allowed to imagine coming back. Why is that?" Suddenly, the walk into the forest and die plan has to compete with walk into the forest and find a third option. Compare that to Ginny's canon role. Ginny loves him fiercely, but she's benched at the Burrow for most of Deathly Hallows, turned into the person he writes to rather than the person he strategizes with. Luna, by contrast, is structurally an outsider. No overprotective mum to ground her, no safe house to retreat to, no sense that she should stay behind while the adults work. She's at the wedding. She's at Malfoy Manor in canon. In this timeline, she is not the girl Harry leaves. She's the partner who keeps ending up in the same cell. But that creates a new ethical problem. If Harry is in love with Luna, how does that affect every choice where he has to weigh one life against many? Does he risk a whole infiltration team to pull her out of Malfoy Manor faster? Does he hesitate to send her on a scouting mission because the thought of her under the Cruciatus makes his hands shake? Love doesn't make him less heroic. It makes the cost of heroism horrifyingly specific. And that specificity will be tested in the tightest crucible the story has. Deathly Hallows, the wedding under the golden tent, the snatchers and the manor and the cellar, the forest walk, where love and death collide, the final battle, where he has to choose again and again what he's willing to lose. So let's explore how this changes everything when the war finally comes due. The wedding and the goodbye that isn't. Under the golden tent, the war feels far away. For one suspended evening, the Burrow has been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Floating candles, enchanted silk, a band soaring away at a waltz while Weasleys whirl and trip and argue over who's stepping on whose robes. This isn't a story about forgetting the war. It's about that strange, fragile calm right before everything breaks. Harry stands at the edge of it all, in those dress robes Molly bullied him into, watching his family glow under the lantern light. Bill and Fleur laughing. Ginny dancing with Fred and George in a ridiculous 3-person spin. Ron trying to count the steps and failing. And then Luna drifts into his line of sight, in butter-yellow robes with silver sunflowers, head tipped as she studies the tent poles. They hum, you know, she tells him as if continuing a conversation they started years ago. The charms. They're nervous. Big gatherings attract attention. She says it in that calm, dreamy tone, but because we know Luna, we know she's not just talking about Nargles. She's putting words to the dread Harry's been swallowing all day. Means he can breathe. Just a little. He laughs, soft and startled, and the noise of the wedding blurs. "Come walk with me," he asks. And it comes out too quickly, too urgent. He wants to protect her from what's coming, and he has no idea how. He pulls her away from the dance floor, past Aunt Muriel's complaints and Hagrid's booming toast, out toward the edge of the wards where the music is a distant thrum. He's rehearsed this in his head. "I'm leaving. It's dangerous. I can't tell you why. Thank you for everything." But the words tangle, because what if this is the last time he sees her? What if he only ever said half of what she's become to him? "I'm going to have to go," he manages. "Soon, with Ron and Hermione. It's important." Luna studies his face for a long moment. Then she nods, as if he's just confirmed the answer to a question she's been quietly working out for months. "I know," she says. "You've been looking at the horizon more than the people in front of you." And Mrs. Weasley whispers differently when she's afraid. A tiny smile. The Order forgets I'm listening. What if, in this timeline, the one person he can't fool is the girl everyone underestimates? She doesn't pry. She doesn't demand details. This changes everything about how this goodbye feels. "You have to go," she says simply. "The pattern doesn't work if you stay. But because you're Harry Weasley, you'll try to come back." He huffs out something that's almost a laugh, almost a sob. "I will come back," he says, and that promise is too big, too dangerous, but he gives it to her anyway. For a heartbeat, the world narrows to the space between them. He steps in and hugs her, and it's meant to be quick, brotherly, safe. It isn't. Her arms loop around his neck, his hands splay against the small of her back, and they just stay there, breathing the same air, memorizing. He pulls back just enough to see her eyes. There's a question there. There's an answer in his. He leans in, aiming for her cheek, and at the last second the angle shifts, the distance shortens, and the Patronus crashes through the tent. The Ministry has fallen. Scrimgeour is dead. They are coming. The spell voice shatters the moment. Screams rise, chairs topple, the music snaps off. In a blink, wands are in hands. Order members are barking orders. Guests are disapparating or ducking under tables as curses rip through the golden canopy. Harry is yanked sideways by Ron, shoved toward Hermione. In the chaos, he sees a flash of butter yellow Luna drawing her wand, her hair a pale banner as she turns toward the danger instead of away from it. Their eyes meet once, across the maelstrom. No time for words, no time for almosts. Then the smoke swallows her, and he's gone, dissipating into the next, darker chapter of the war, with the feel of her arms still around him, and a kiss that didn't happen burning on his mouth. So, let's explore what it means to hunt Horcruxes when both of them are carrying a goodbye that never quite became the truth. Malfoy Manor, rescuing Luna, choosing love. He leaves the burrow with the taste of almost on his mouth and discovers that almost is a terrible thing to carry into a war. Because when Luna is taken from the Hogwarts Express, that almost becomes a wound. In canon, her kidnapping is awful. But here it hits a Harry who has already almost kissed her, already wrapped his arms around her and then disapparated away. Means he doesn't just lose a friend, he loses the person who understood his nightmares, who could stand beside him in that strange, quiet place where Thestrals graze and grief breathes. What if the one person who made the Horcrux hunt feel bearable simply vanished? This isn't a story about stoic heroism. The early months on the run are messy. Harry wakes in the tent gasping. torn between Voldemort's visions and flashes of Luna's face behind cellar bars he hasn't actually seen yet. He hears her voice in the wind outside the protective charms. He keeps checking the Marauder's map he no longer has, by reflex, wanting to see Luna Lovegood pacing some safe corridor. Ron snaps at him once, half joking that staring into the dark won't summon her back. Harry doesn't laugh. So when they're dragged into Malfoy Manor and he hears Bellatrix shriek about the blood traitor girl and the odd one from Ravenclaw, the bottom drops out. In canon, that cellar is a horror. But because Luna is there in this timeline, it becomes the point of no return. Harry isn't just thinking about wands and windows and timing. He's thinking, if she's dead, I did this. I left her on that train. He crashes into the cellar, expecting bones. Instead, he gets Luna, pale and thin, but standing. Her eyes widen, then soften, as if she'd just been waiting for the scene to catch up. Of course you came, her expression says. Of course, the boy who grew up in a family that always comes for its own would come for me. She steps toward him, and for a heartbeat, the wall narrows to the space between them. They collide in an embrace that is utterly impractical for a prison break. She smells of damp stone and stolen time. He's shaking. She isn't. Luna's hands press briefly against his back, grounding him, and she murmurs something absurdly gentle about Nargles having a terrible sense of timing. It's almost funny, which is what makes his throat close. This changes everything, because in that cellar, Harry finally understands that the thought of dying has never frightened him as much as the thought of Luna dying while believing he didn't care enough to come. He realizes he would walk into that drawing room unarmed if it meant buying her 10 more seconds of life. That isn't strategy, that's love. So, let's explore the smallest, loudest choice he makes. When Dobby's rescue explodes into chaos and there's no time for speeches, or almosts, Harry doesn't reach for Ron or Hermione or even the fallen wands. His hand goes straight to Luna's, fingers closing, knuckles white. He disapparates with her at the center of his grip, and for the first time, at the center of his heart. But what does it mean to go back to the Burrow, to Shell Cottage, to the next phase of the war, with that choice burning between them, and still no kiss, no confession, just a hand he hasn't quite let go. Shell Cottage, confessions among the ruins. They land at Shell Cottage with that grip still unbroken. Wind off the sea, the crack of apparition, and Harry's fingers locked around Luna's, as if Malfoy Manor might reach through the air and take her back. Shell Cottage is safe, but only in the way a half-collapsed lifeboat is safe. Bill's wards hum. Fleur moves quietly between beds. There are too many bandages and not enough chairs. Dobby is dead. Ollivander shakes. Griphook eyes them with a calculating glint that already smells of Gringotts and dragonfire. This isn't a story about a peaceful interlude. It's a pause between blows. Canon gives us a hush here, but what if that hush is where the confession finally happens? Because the funerals are crammed into the cracks. Dobby's grave on the hill, the unspoken funerals for the people they couldn't even bury. Sirius, Dumbledore, Moody, Hedwig, each name a stone Harry is already carrying toward the next impossible task. At first, Harry does what he always does. He helps dig the grave. He volunteers for watch. Means he keeps moving so he doesn't have to feel the way his hand still remembers Luna's wrist, small and breakable under his grip in that cellar. But because Shell Cottage is tiny and grief is loud, there's only one place he can really be alone: the beach, at night. So, let's explore that night. The others sleep or pretend to. The sea is black glass, the stars thin. Luna finds him without asking where he's gone. She just walks down in her bare feet, dressing gown flapping, as if the tide had written his name and she'd followed the letters. She sits beside him in the sand, close enough that their shoulders almost touch. Not quite. They talk first about the ones they failed. She mentions her mother, the way the spell went wrong, and the way grief never really leaves, only changes its shape. Harry talks about Sirius, and this time he doesn't stop at the veil. He tells her about the screaming afterward, the way no one knew what to do with a boy who wanted to jump in after his godfather. Luna listens the way she did by the Thestrals, steady and unafraid of the worst parts. Then Malfoy Manor slips in. Hermione's screams, Ron's hoarse shouting, the flash of Bellatrix's knife, and Luna hanging above him, pale and patient and still making jokes about the ceiling. The words come out wrong at first. I can't. You can't. He grips the sand, then her hand. When they took you, I thought I'd lost you too. I was more afraid than when Voldemort was in my head. More than the graveyard. More than the lake. I kept seeing you behind that veil with Sirius and I couldn't breathe. He doesn't say I love you as a grand declaration. He says it as an explanation. I think I started needing you back when Sirius died. You were the only one who didn't try to fix it. You just stood with me. And it's been growing since. Through the DA, the Department of Mysteries, the Thestrals, all of it. I love you. I don't know when it started. I just know I can't pretend it isn't there. Clear. I know, she says. And there's the tiniest smile. I've loved you for a while too. Not because you're the chosen one. Because you're Harry, who digs graves with his own hands and still thanks house elves. Then she does the thing no one else quite dares. She names the danger without flinching. You're walking toward death, she says, as if stating the weather. You think you might have to die, to protect everyone, to protect your family. She doesn't ask if she's right. He doesn't deny it. This changes everything, she continues. But it doesn't change that. I won't pretend you're safe so we can feel better for a little while. That wouldn't be fair to either of us. He can't. The Horcrux scar on his soul is pulsing in time with the sea. So what do we do? He asks. Fifth question of the night, and the only one that really matters. Luna threads their fingers together, finally, fully. We make a promise, she says. If we live, we'll be together. Properly. No hiding, no might have beens. Until then, we carry it with us. Not as a distraction, as something to fight toward. It isn't a kiss. Not yet. It's an agreement. A fragile, stubborn piece of future wedged between war plans and dragon schemes. Behind them, the cottage windows glow with lamplight and looming decisions. Ahead, the dark outline of Gringotts waits on the horizon of the timeline. Between those 2 points, Harry and Luna stand up, still hand in hand, and walk back toward the house, already carrying that promise into battle. Hallows versus Horcruxes, Luna's philosophy in the tent. The next real test of that promise doesn't happen in a sunlit garden. It happens in a damp, wind-battered tent, with rain needling the canvas and fear hanging heavier than the chill. After Malfoy Manor, Luna doesn't go straight back to Hogwarts in this timeline. She spends a stretch with the trio, patched up by Fleur, wrapped in one of Molly's old shawls that someone grabbed from Shell Cottage by accident. Of course, Luna ends up in the tent debates. Of course, she walks in on one of those circular arguments about the Elder Wand, and the invisibility cloak, and the Horcruxes, and asks, very mildly, whether anyone's eaten. This isn't a story about Luna swooping in with all the answers. She doesn't. She sits cross-legged on Harry's camp bed, fingers worrying the hem of that shawl, and listens while Hermione explains the tale of the three brothers again, this time with diagrams in the dirt. Ron is still dazzled by the Hallows. Power, shortcuts, a way to protect the people they love without losing anyone else. It's intoxicating, especially when you've watched your family be targeted for years. But because Luna is Luna, she tilts her head and asks a different question. Why do you think the third brother greeted death as an old friend? Not, how do we get the cloak to hide forever? Not, could the wand beat Voldemort? She treats the tale as a parable, not a treasure map. For her, the point isn't that one brother outsmarts death, it's that running from death turns you cruel, and clutching at life turns you hollow. Pattern interrupt. She laughs. Soft, incredulous. I don't think death would enjoy being chased, she says. It must be terribly tiring, everyone trying to own it. The tent goes quiet. Even Ron stops poking the fire. Luna doesn't dismiss the Hallows. That would feel wrong to her. In a world where Thestrals and Veils and Nardals all coexist, she believes in unseen things, so of course she believes 3 ancient objects might exist. But she asks whether hunting them would honor the people they've lost, or just feed the fear that those losses could happen again. If you had them all, she asks Harry, would you let Fred and George run into battle? Would you let Ginny choose? Growing up a Weasley means Harry knows what it is to clutch and to release. Means he has watched Molly hover at the burrow window, wanting to lock every child inside, and knowing she cannot. Under Luna's gaze, the Hallows stop being a cheat code and start looking like a betrayal. To chase them now would be saying that Lily's sacrifice, James's, Sirius's, Dumbledore's, were all mistakes to be corrected rather than gifts freely given. This changes everything about why Harry chooses Horcruxes over Hallows. In canon, he obeys Dumbledore's plan. Here, he also chooses because Luna has named the deeper cost. Trying to master death would mean refusing the very terms on which his parents loved him. So, let's explore the consequence. When the time comes for that walk into the forest, it won't just be Dumbledore's words in the White King's cross that echo. It will be Luna in the tent, rain on canvas, asking whether he wants to greet death as an enemy or as an old friend. And Harry Weasley, son and brother first, will already know his answer. The forest walk, reimagined with Luna's shadow. He walks into the forest already knowing he's going to die. That part doesn't change. What changes is who walks there with him in his head. Canon gives us a boy who has lost everything. This timeline sends in a young man who has finally found something, someone he desperately wants to keep. As Harry slips the invisibility cloak around his shoulders, surrounded by the chaos of the castle, he doesn't only think of Mum and Dad, of Ron and Ginny and the twins. His mind flashes, sharp and unwanted, to Luna's face tilted up toward the rain at Shell Cottage, eyes half closed, asking whether he'd rather greet death as an enemy or as an old friend. He had laughed then, a low, incredulous sound, because she'd said it while balancing a seashell on his head and complaining about the wind in his hair. But because this isn't a story about easy choices, that memory hurts now. It's tenderness weaponized. It means he knows exactly what he's walking away from. On the stairs, when he passes Ginny holding a sobbing first year, there's a flicker of temptation to ask, "Have you seen Luna?" He doesn't. He can't. He makes the choice consciously. No goodbye. Not to her. With Ron or Ginny, he might manage a rough hug and a lie about seeing them soon. With Luna, one look at the girl who believed in him when he couldn't stand himself and his feet might refuse to move. He knows that about himself, and that knowledge is its own kind of grown-up, because growing up with the Weasleys means learning that love doesn't always say everything it feels. Sometimes it just does what has to be done. He walks faster in the trees. The air turns damp and close, and the sounds of battle fall away. This is where, in canon, Harry's thoughts circle around his parents and the inevitability of death. Here, the circle widens. He imagines Luna's laugh echoing through the burrow kitchen, her wand tucked behind her ear as she explains to a baffled Arthur how Muggle radios are obviously full of trapped Raxperts. He sees her at Shell Cottage, fingers stained with ink, sketching Thestrals and absent-mindedly adding freckles to the one that is clearly supposed to be him. What if they'd had more time? What if the war ended and they went back to Hogwarts together? Not as weapons, but as students. There's a jagged, forbidden image of a small hand in his, a child with Luna's wide eyes and his messy hair, chasing gnomes in the garden while Molly pretends not to see. He crushes it down, because it hurts too much and because it's exactly what he's giving up. When he turns the resurrection stone in his fingers, the familiar figures appear. James, Lily, Sirius, Remus. That core canon structure holds, but the monologue behind his eyes has shifted. There's a fleeting, almost embarrassed thought, will Luna see Thestrals at my funeral? Will she stand where we once stood together and tell some terrified first year that death is not the enemy? Maybe someday he'll see her again too, not through Hallows, but in whatever comes after, in that place she always insisted was just the next great adventure. This changes everything about how he accepts the end. He isn't walking into the forest because he thinks his life is expendable. He's walking in knowing exactly how valuable it is, how much joy and oddity and future it could have held, and choosing to lay it down anyway. His love for Luna doesn't weaken his resolve, it clarifies it. Means he knows, with terrifying precision, who he's dying to protect, the girl who taught him to see Thestrals without fear, the family that took him in, the world that might one day be gentle enough for her children to grow up unafraid. He steps into the clearing, heart hammering, Voldemort waiting. And, as the green light gathers, there's one last question hanging in the air. What happens when a boy who has learned to greet death as an old friend is given the chance to come back? But in this timeline, where Harry walks into the forest carrying not just a Horcrux but years of Weasley warmth and Luna's quiet faith, there's one more possible interruption. What if Luna found him first? Not by chance. Luna has never been a creature of coincidence. She's attuned to emotional currents the way other people are to Quidditch scores. She feels the castle's mood tilt, feels the way Harry's magic pulls inward, thin and sharp as a knife. Everyone else is counting heads, checking barricades. Luna notices the space where Harry should be, and isn't. That absence is louder to her than any battle roar, so she goes looking. Of course she does. Through shattered corridors, past fallen stones, bare feet slapping against dusty flagstones because she lost her shoes 3 crises ago and simply forgot to care. She reaches a window and sees the tree line, sees a single figure moving towards the darkness, and suddenly she understands. This isn't a story about Luna being oblivious. It's a story about her refusing to look away. She meets him at the forest edge, where the grass gives up and the shadows begin. Harry startles. He's been rehearsing goodbyes in his head, not expecting a real one. He tries the obvious lie first. I just need to check something. I'll be back. It's almost funny in a bleak way that the boy who faced Voldemort 4 times still thinks he can bluff Luna Lovegood. She tilts her head, studying him with that clear, unblinking gaze. You're not coming back, she says gently. Not accusing, just correct. He can't tell her the full plan. Dumbledore's secrets, the Hallows, the Horcrux in his chest. There isn't time. And even now he's trying to protect her from the worst of it. Means he reaches for vague heroism. It's something only I can do. Harry, you don't have to protect me from the truth. You never did. There's a flicker of humor. You did invite me to the Department of Mysteries after all. Battle-tested trust, thrown back at him with a small wry smile. Here's the pattern interrupt. His parents, in the forest, will give him blessing and closure. But because Luna finds him first, she offers something narrower and stranger. If you have to go, she says, stepping close enough that he can see the grime on her cheek and the steadiness in her eyes, I'll keep believing in you. Even if the world decides you failed, I'll tell them you didn't. And when it's over, if there's anything left, I'll try to build something gentle in the ruins. For you, for everyone you loved. This changes everything and nothing. Harry still goes. Of course he does. He's growing up Harry Weasley, raised to run towards the fire, not away. But the walk is heavier now, more human. He isn't just carrying a prophecy. He's carrying Luna's promise to make the aftermath kinder than the war that birthed it. Would you trade his canonical solitude for this shared courage? Or does the original Lonely March feel truer to the myth of the Chosen One? For this timeline, we leave it as a vignette, a possible memory that only he and Luna share, or don't. So, let's explore what their love means after the war, if Harry survives with that promise echoing in his chest. Battle of Hogwarts, fighting for Luna's life. Harry hits the entrance hall at a dead run and realizes, with a cold, clean jolt, that every choice he makes tonight is measured against one question. Where is Luna? Canon gives us flashes of her bravery here. The girl who once read the Quibbler upside down is suddenly the witch who stuns a Death Eater cleanly in a corridor, who runs beside Harry to the Ravenclaw common room, who helps him remember the lost diadem in the Room of Requirement. This isn't a story about softening Luna into a prize to be protected. It's about what happens when Harry Weasley, who grew up in a family where you never leave your own behind, realizes that the person he most can't lose is running toward the danger with him. So, what if every shout of "Stupefy" and every sprint through shattered stone is also a frantic scan for pale hair and radish earrings? What if when he, Ron, and Hermione race to find the diadem, Harry keeps adjusting their route because he knows Luna is somewhere on the 7th floor, dueling near the tapestry, refusing to give ground? Means he doesn't just trust her courage in the abstract, he's factoring it into his tactics, the way Fred and George once wordlessly flanked him in a Quidditch match. We see it in small, sharp moments. A Death Eater's curse arcs toward a group of DA fighters. Harry dives, not because he knows who they are, but because he hears Luna's clear, oddly calm voice calling a warning. He throws up a shield charm over her first, then the others. Later, when McGonagall demands someone draw Voldemort's attention away from the defenders on the bridge, Harry doesn't volunteer alone. He volunteers them. He trusts Luna with the decoy plan because he knows she won't flinch, even when the air tastes of ash and fear. But because she's Luna, she refuses every attempt to push her behind him. When he snaps, "Stay with Ginny, you'll be safer," she only tilts her head and says, perfectly matter of fact, "You'll be safer if I'm with you." It's infuriating. It's terrifying. It's the same stubbornness that once insisted on walking with him to the Thestrals after Sirius's death, now weaponized against Death Eaters. Their near-death moment comes fast. In the Room of Requirement, fiend fire roars, the world becomes heat and screaming shelves, and a falling beam scythes down where Luna is hauling another student toward the door. Harry doesn't think. He tackles her clear as the beam smashes, splinters tearing his arm. For a heartbeat, they're nose to nose on the floor, both coughing, both alive. The realization slams into him harder than the impact. If they walk out of this, he will not spend one more day pretending this is just friendship. Voldemort falls. The cheering rises. But Harry's first free breath is not victory. It's a horse, panicked. Has anyone seen Luna? He pushes through hugging Weasleys and sobbing students, past Kingsley's praise and McGonagall's relief, scanning the wreckage until he spots her on the edge of the Great Hall, wand still in hand, talking gently to a shell-shocked first year. Their reunion is quiet amid the roar. She looks up, sees him, and smiles in that unshaken, utterly Luna way. And in this timeline, that moment, the way he crosses the space to her, the way his shoulders finally drop, changes everything about what comes next. So, let's explore what it means when the war ends, and Harry Weasley's first instinct isn't to be a symbol, but to choose the girl who stood in the fire with him. Aftermath. Choosing life together in the rubble. The noise doesn't stop so much as fall in on itself. The Great Hall is still roaring with grief and movement, but the battle's sharp edges have dulled into something heavy and stunned. Bodies are lined in careful rows. Fred, Remus, Tonks, Colin. Names that used to mean laughter or exasperation, or homework, help now mean stillness on stone. This isn't a story about the victory feast. There's no feast. There's tea gone cold in forgotten cups, and blood tracked across the flagstones by people who keep realizing, mid-step, that they're still alive. The Weasleys are gathered around Fred the way they once gathered around a Quidditch wireless. Only no one is shouting now. Harry stands there long enough to feel the shape of that absence press into him. Means he can't breathe for a second. Means he wants to step forward and also run. But because he grew up as their son, because Molly's wail is the sound that raised him, he stays. He helps George straighten Fred's jumper. He listens to Arthur say, in a voice that doesn't quite work, that they'll manage. Somehow. And then, across the hall, Luna. Hair tangled, face streaked, robes torn where a curse grazed her shoulder. She's kneeling beside Colin Creevy's body, gently closing his eyes. When she looks up and sees Harry watching, she gives him that same small, unwavering smile we ended on. The one that says, I see you, I see all of this, we're still here. He crosses to her before he's even decided to. The hall blurs into a wash of red and black and candlelight. When he reaches her, words fail in a way that feels almost merciful, so he just pulls her into his arms. They're both shaking. They're both sticky with blood that isn't entirely their own. Her hands fist in the back of his ruined jumper. His forehead presses into the curve of her neck. For a long moment, the war is only the sound of their breathing trying to find a rhythm that isn't panic. What if this is the first choice Harry makes in peace? Not to comfort a crowd, not to go stand by Dumbledore's portrait, but to hold the girl who walked into the Department of Mysteries with him and never flinched. This changes everything about how he understands what his life is for. Later, minutes, hours, it's hard to tell. They slip out into the courtyard, past shattered windows and fallen stone. The air smells of smoke and dawn. Rubble is piled where walls used to be. A fallen gargoyle is staring at the sky as if surprised to be horizontal. They sit on a broken step. Harry names them. Haltingly. Fred, who taught him that mischief could be a kind of protection. Remus, who showed him his father not as legend, but as deeply flawed, deeply loved man. Tonks, who made war look ridiculous on purpose so the kids wouldn't be so afraid. Snape, Harry adds, tasting the strangeness of it. I don't know if I can forgive him, but he kept me alive, kept all of this going. Luna nods, eyes on the ruined battlements. Colin will be pleased he died here, she says softly. He always wanted to be where the story was happening. He'd probably ask you to smile more. In the photographs, there's a flicker of a grin there, the barest edge of humor in the rubble. What do you think they'd want us to do? Harry asks. With this? He gestures at the broken castle, at the half-risen sun, at the thin thread of future he can suddenly feel tugging at him. Live, Luna says simply, in ways they couldn't, in ways that might make them roll their eyes. He turns to her. For the first time, there's no Horcrux hunt shadowing his words, no Hallows puzzle humming in the back of his mind. Just the terrifying, ordinary possibility of tomorrow. I love you, he says. No prophecy, no caveats. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be anyone except the boy who's fighting, but I know I want something gentle and strange and honest with you, if you still want that too. She studies him, head tilted, as if he's a new kind of creature she's delighted to have discovered. Of course I do, she answers. Not grand, just luminous. I was rather planning on it. They sit there, hand finding hand, and look toward the light bleeding over the hills. A future neither of them ever truly believed in is arriving, slow and golden and real. The question is, what does Harry Weasley do with a life that finally belongs to him and to Luna, and not to the war? Analytical interlude. How Harry Luna changes the trio. Harry and Luna staring into that new sunrise doesn't just answer the question of who he ends up with. It quietly rewrites the gravitational pull of the entire friend group. When the chosen one's heart moves, the whole constellation of the Golden Trio shifts around it. Start with Ron and Hermione. In canon, they're constantly triangulated around Harry, worried about his temper, his grief, his latest detour into mortal peril. They're best friends, but they're also in their heads his handlers. In this timeline, Harry is still volatile and still traumatized, but because Luna is his primary emotional anchor, Ron and Hermione are not on 24-hour Harry watch. This changes everything for their relationship. Without that constant background panic, they have more bandwidth to actually see each other. Ron can argue with Hermione about house elf rights without feeling he's failing Harry by being distracted. Hermione can nag Ron about homework without also checking Harry's scar every 5 minutes. Their bickering still flares, of course. They're Ron and Hermione. But because Harry's core stability is elsewhere, their fights don't always get derailed by, "We can't do this, Harry's upset," means they can have the ugly, necessary rows that grow a romance, not just a crisis team. And Hermione's view of Luna? That's a slow, fascinating arc. Early on, she files Luna under brilliant but deeply unsound. The Quibbler, the Nargles, the dirigible plums. Hermione's rational mind dismisses all of it. Then she watches Luna sit with Harry after a nightmare, saying nothing for 10 minutes straight, just breathing with him until his hands stop shaking. She watches Harry come back from talking to Luna by the Thestrals actually calmer, where all her research and logic only made him feel guilty for not coping better. There's a moment, maybe in the year after the war, when Hermione catches Harry having a flashback at the burrow. She freezes, cataloging grounding techniques, breathing exercises, textbook responses. Luna simply reaches over, takes his hand, and starts talking about how the kitchen clock must be terribly bored when everyone is safe. It's absurd. It works. That's when Hermione's respect crystallizes. This isn't a story about reason versus nonsense. It's about different languages of care. Hermione learns to treat Luna's nonsense as a parallel system of knowledge. Ron's journey is less philosophical and more Ron. He still teases Luna in 4th and 5th year, still pulls faces at her father's articles. But because Harry is so obviously in love with her, the joke can't stay shallow. You can't call your brother's person loony forever. Not when she's the one who walked into the Department of Mysteries with him. Not when she's the one who stood beside Ginny in the Battle of Hogwarts, cursing Death Eaters with eerie, serene precision. Pattern interrupt. Picture Ron and Luna in the Burrows Garden, 2 years post-war, arguing about Quidditch formations. Ron is passionately diagramming Chudley Cannon's tactics in the dirt. Luna is calmly explaining that the Falmouth Falcons only foul so much because they're afraid of emotional intimacy. Ron splutters, then laughs, then realizes he's genuinely enjoying this. They bond over the Cannon's tragic incompetence, over being the ones who will absolutely never understand Xenophilius's latest headline. Over time, Harry's odd friend becomes my odd sister-in-law in everything but paperwork. Around them, the circle widens. Neville, who in canon is already quietly tethered to both Harry and Luna, becomes the bridge between their worlds. He trains with Harry for oral work, tends experimental greenhouses with Luna, and hosts Sunday dinners where war veterans and former DA members pass the potatoes and trauma process in equal measure. Ginny, freed from the slow, painful unspooling of a Harry romance that never quite fits, gets to ask, what if my story isn't orbiting his? She throws herself into professional Quidditch, then into inventing new hexes with a kind of joyful ferocity. Her eventual partner, whether it's a muggle musician who has no idea what a bludger is, or a fellow holyhead harpy, meets a Ginny who chose herself first. The result is a post-war network that's wider and less hierarchical. Harry isn't the sole pillar holding everyone's grief. He's one of many beams in a messy, resilient structure. Luna supports Harry. Hermione supports the cause. Ron supports the laughter holding it all together. Neville grounds them in soil and patience. Ginny embodies forward motion. So, let's explore what that means for healing. In this AU, the question after Voldemort isn't, can Harry carry this? It's, how do we all carry each other? Harry and Luna's love doesn't just change who he kisses on the astronomy tower. It redistributes emotional labor across an entire generation. The boy who lived becomes the man who is held, and in that shift, the whole timeline learns a different way to survive. Careers and callings. Auror, naturalist, or something new. So if the post-war question is, how do we all carry each other? The next one is obvious. What do Harry and Luna actually do with the rest of their lives? Once the prophecies are quiet and the battle scars stop bleeding, what work do they choose when no one can force them anymore? Canon tells us Harry becomes an Auror, stepping straight from school into another war-shaped uniform. It makes sense for a boy who only ever learned how to fight. But because this Harry grew up as a Weasley, because he spent years being held instead of handled, that decision is no longer automatic. What if, when Kingsley offers him a fast track into the Auror office, Harry hesitates? What if the first person he looks at in that moment is Luna? This isn't a story about Luna gently talking him out of bravery. She knows better than anyone that he will always run toward danger if someone needs protecting. Instead, she asks the question no one else does. Do you want to keep living in battle formations? That lands differently for a Harry who's already watched her trace the constellations of his scars with steady, unafraid fingers. So, let's explore a compromise. He does join the Aurors, but not as the Ministry's favorite blunt instrument. Means he walks in already suspicious of systems that chew up children and call it necessary sacrifice. He pushes for restorative approaches to captured Death Eaters, insists on trauma support for young recruits, and quietly bans acceptable losses from departmental vocabulary. The boy who lived becomes the man who refuses to build a new world on the same old cruelties. And beside him, Luna doesn't become an Auror's shadow. She apprentices under a reformed, Newt Scamander-style naturalist vanishing for weeks into Welsh valleys to track resurfacing Dementor populations, or crossing the North Sea to document Thestral herds. She publishes papers that start as on the misclassification of so-called dark creatures and end as manifestos about who gets called a monster. Every so often, her research and Harry's cases collide. An Aurora raid paused because Luna points out the dangerous creature is actually defending its young, or a werewolf community that will only negotiate if the girl who believed them human is in the room. In another version of this timeline, they postpone everything. No ministry desks, no fixed address. For 2 or 3 years they travel together, chasing rumors of lingering Horcrux fragments and cursed artifacts, then staying an extra month because Luna has discovered a rare, translucent jellyfish that feeds on ambient magic. Their tent is half war room, half field laboratory. One day, Harry's dueling a curse breaker gone rogue. The next, he's holding a notebook while Luna sketches a creature only they can see. Their callings pull in different directions, but the tension is the point. Harry grounds Luna when her theories spiral into the stratosphere, reminding her that policies change one law, one courtroom, one rescued child at a time. Luna lifts Harry's gaze when he starts measuring his worth in arrests made or villains subdued, pointing out a sunrise over a frozen lake and saying, very seriously, that it would be a shame to save the world and never actually look at it. This changes everything about his relationship to destiny. His career is no longer the extension of a prophecy. It's a series of choices made in conversation with someone who loves him, not his legend. Love doesn't erase his past as the chosen one. It redirects it. The boy who was told he must die for the world grows into a man who asks, with Luna at his side, what if we lived for it instead? And that question will shape not just their work, but the way they build a home, raise children, and teach the next generation what a life can be when it isn't scripted by fear. Home life. The Potter Lovegood household. So what does it actually look like when the boy who was supposed to die for the world and the girl who was never quite in step with it decide to build a home together? Not a prophecy, not a headline, an address. Their house is the answer to that question before they ever tried to put it into words. Picture the burrow if it had been allowed to dream in Luna's direction for a few years. Crooked staircases that change angle on Tuesdays, not because of faulty magic, but because Luna swears the house sleeps better that way. Protective charms layered so thick around the garden gate that even gnomes pause, impressed. And at the center, a kitchen table permanently buried under spellbooks with frayed covers, quibbler-back issues, and half-finished sketches of creatures that may or may not exist. This isn't a story about domestic perfection. Harry still craves stability the way a starving child eyes bread. He counts chairs, counts heads, counts the seconds until everyone is home safe. Luna, growing up in a tower of organized chaos, trusts that life will wobble and somehow land on its feet, so their routines become a negotiated truce. There is always dinner together, but the time is flexible. There is a bedtime for the children, but it can be broken for meteor showers or a herd of Thestrals drifting over the orchard. Means he learns that safety can include surprise. Means she discovers that some structures aren't cages, they're nets. Their door is almost never locked from the inside. Neville drops in with soil under his nails. Ginny storms through during Quidditch season, ranting about fouls, while Luna calmly offers her tea in a cup painted with crumple-horned snorkax. There are Weasley sleepovers on mattresses that appear wherever there's floor. And once, an accidental visit from a ministry inspector and leaves with a signed copy of Xenophilius's old editorials and no clear memory of why he came. When they argue, it isn't about Nargles. Harry has long since accepted that some questions don't need his kind of proof. The real fault lines run through risk and responsibility. How dangerous should their work be now that they have children? How much do you tell an 11-year-old about Horcruxes and veils, and friends who didn't come home? Harry leans towards shields and silence. Luna leans toward honesty and trust. They fight over whether a mission is worth the danger, whether a child should go to a memorial, whether keeping the dead on the mantle means trapping the living in a mausoleum. Pattern interrupt. On their wedding anniversary, they don't go to a restaurant, they go to Hogwarts. Every year, they walk the grounds, visit the lake, stand in the corridor where Dumbledore's army once met. They light candles, one for Sirius, one for Dobby, one for Fred, and a cluster for the unnamed fallen. Their children are there, listening as Mum and Dad tell stories that are honest but careful, naming both the fear and the courage, because pretending the war never happened would be another kind of curse. So, let's explore what that does to a family's emotional weather. It means trauma doesn't get locked in the attic. It gets a chair at the table, a name, and then slowly, less power. There are slammed doors, nightmares, broken plates, and one memorable week when a miscast charm leaves the hallway gently raining feathers. But because Harry and Luna have built a place where being odd, broken, or haunted is never a reason to be unloved, the chaos never feels like the Dursleys' cruelty or the war's terror. It feels lived in. It feels chosen. And that foundation will matter when the next generation begins to ask what their own lives and loves might be for in this altered timeline. Parenting the next generation, Lily, Luna, and beyond. So what happens when that lived-in, chosen chaos has to make room for trunks, owls, and a name that, in canon, was only ever a memorial? Because in this timeline, Lily Luna Potter isn't a quiet tribute tacked onto the end of a war. It's a doorway. In Rowling's epilogue, Lily Luna is a gesture of affection. Harry folding Luna into his children's names, acknowledging the girl who believed in him when the rest of Hogwarts whispered. Here, the gesture becomes incarnate. Lily Luna is not just honored, she's holding Harry's hand, smudging ink on his fingers as she corrects his attempt at plaiting their daughter's hair, laughing when the braid turns into something that might actually attract Nargles. This changes everything about how those children grow up, because they're not just the chosen one's kids, or the Auror's lot. They're the children of the man who walked into the forest to die, and the woman who watched her mother vanish in a flash of experimental magic. Both of them determined that their own kids will never learn about death from a locked cupboard or a shattered spell. So, let's explore who those kids become. Maybe the eldest is James Xenophilius, a boy with Luna's faraway gaze and Harry's tendency to throw himself between danger and the people he loves. He's the one who stops mid-Quidditch practice because he's noticed a first-year crying under the stands, and then spends the next hour explaining Thestrals in a way that makes them sound less frightening and more honest. This isn't a story about perfect ethereal children. He still forgets his homework and tracks mud through the kitchen. But because he's been raised where feelings are named, not punished, he apologizes without flinching. Maybe the second is Albus Arthur, stubbornly practical, quietly furious when things are unfair. He's the child who argues with Professor McGonagall about house point systems, who writes an extra credit essay on why Slytherin shouldn't be treated as a dumping ground for every ambitious 11-year-old. Means he becomes the one who challenges the jokes at the Gryffindor table, the one who says, "No, actually, Mum's friend Draco helped Dad win the war too." She sketches strange creatures in the margins of her charms notes, but her questions cut to the bone. Dad, if killing Voldemort stopped the war, why do people still hate Muggles? Mum, were you scared in the Department of Mysteries, or did you know it would be all right? Harry and Luna don't dodge those questions. They refuse to glamorize the war into some shining legend, but they also won't pretend it was a bad dream that simply ended. Bedtime stories at the Potter house are not about glory, they're about choices. Harry talks about Sirius and Fred and Remus with tears he doesn't hide. Luna talks about her mother's accident, about the veil, about standing in the rubble of Hogwarts and deciding to rebuild the Ravenclaw common room ceiling with stars. So when Hogwarts finally comes calling, bullying and house divisions are not abstract warnings. They're mapped out at the kitchen table with biscuits and ink. If someone calls you loony, Luna tells Lily, ask them what they're afraid of. Harry adds, and if you see a kid eating alone, remember I was that kid once. Sit down. On platform 9 3/4, that philosophy is tested. James swings onto the train with easy confidence, already promising to write home about which teachers are secretly funny. Albus hangs back, glancing at the Slytherin crest on a passing prefect's robes, with a measuring frown, wondering what it would mean if the hat whispered a different path. Luna grips her trolley, eyes wide, not with dread, but with the stunned realization that this is the castle that nearly killed her parents and somehow gave them everything. Harry and Luna stand together, their hands brushing, watching the scarlet train hiss steam around their children. For them, Hogwarts is a graveyard and a home, a place of trauma and transformation. They have buried friends here, they fell in love here, and now they are sending their children into that same stone labyrinth with the quiet, radical conviction that it can be better this time. Because the question hanging in the air, as the whistle blows and Luna leans out of the window to wave, isn't just what house will they be in? It's much sharper. It's what will this new generation dare to change that even Harry and Luna never did? Alternate epilogue. Platform 9 3/4, rewritten. What if we opened on steam and echoes instead of a neat, closed book happily ever after? The whistle is the same, the bricks of King's Cross are the same, but the people stepping through the barrier are not. Harry and Luna arrive hand in hand, flanked by children who have inherited Harry's hair and Luna's gaze. That sees too much. There's a Thestral feather charm at Luna's throat, its black sheen catching the station lights. It's an old feather, from a creature only they could see when they were children, and it hangs where her cork necklace once did. This changes everything about how we read this platform scene, because it isn't just an ending. It's a return to a threshold they've crossed before. Ron and Hermione are already there, arguing amiably about whether they're early or late. Neville, stockier now and comfortably confident, is showing one of his kids how to tell the difference between a magical and a muggle suitcase. Ginny stands with her own family further down the platform, hair still blazing, trading a wry salute with Harry that says, "We did all right, didn't we?" The war generation has grown up. They're softer at the edges, but not erased. As they approach the barrier, Luna tilts her head, considering the brick. "Thresholds, remember," she murmurs to their eldest, who is clutching a trolley with white-knuckled determination. They're places where you can be two things at once, a child and not a child, terrified and very, very brave. Harry squeezes her hand at that, because he remembers being 11 and hollow with fear, and he remembers Luna at 15 telling him that the people they love are just beyond the veil. Their daughter. "Let's keep our Luna here," canon adjacent but shifted, bites her lip. "What if I'm not brave enough for Gryffindor?" she whispers. The question hangs between them, echoing Albus Severus's fear, but refracted through this different marriage. Harry crouches, but Luna speaks first. "Bravery isn't a house," she says gently. "It's a decision you make when your knees are shaking. People laughed at me for years. They still do sometimes. it didn't make them right. Then Harry adds, "You don't have to be me, or Mum, or anyone, just you." The hat sees that, means it can't put you anywhere you truly don't choose. This isn't a story about a chosen one handing down a script. It's about parents who survived being shaped by prophecy and ridicule, trying to protect their child's right to self-definition. They walk through the barrier together. Harry glances back, just once, at the place where a much smaller boy and a much stranger girl once left this world behind for war. He and Luna share a look that says, "We remember. But because we remember, we're doing this differently." The train pulls away in a rush of steam and waving hands. In the fading noise, Harry and Luna stand close, Thestral feather warm against his arm where it brushes him. The future isn't tidy, the past isn't healed. But they chose this life and each other, and they stay on the platform a moment longer, breathing in the magic of a world that might finally learn to change. So, let's explore what that changed world demands of them next. Comparing canons, Ginny versus Luna as endgame. Harry and Luna step off that platform into a world that doesn't quite know what to do with them, which is the perfect moment to pause and ask, what if the story had stayed with Harry and Ginny instead? What does each ending say about how Harry heals? In canon, Harry Ginny is the promise of normalcy after catastrophe. It's Sunday dinners at the Burrow, Weasley jumpers stacked in a basket, Harry back on a broom not as the chosen one, but as a Quidditch nut arguing about fouls with his wife. This isn't a story about destiny dragging him off into the stars. It's about bringing him home. Ginny represents integration. Harry folded into the Weasley family so thoroughly that Potter and Weasley blur into one loud red-haired Quidditch-obsessed unit. That matters because canon Harry is exhausted. He's spent a decade being a symbol. Ginny offers him a life where the biggest crisis is whether James has stolen all the fizzing Whizbees again. Healing through routine, healing through domestic joy, means he can sit in the stands at a Holyhead Harpies match and just be a husband with a bad scarf and a worse shouting voice. Harry Luna, in this timeline, is a different answer to the same wound. Instead of healing by becoming ordinary, he heals by accepting that he will never be entirely ordinary. Their life stays a bit off-center and mystical. There are Thestrals grazing near the back garden. There are dinner conversations that veer from ministry policy to whether love leaves an imprint on magic strong enough to be measured, where Ginny grounds him in the physical, Quidditch, family pranks, the rhythm of school and then of work. Luna draws him into the reflective and unseen. She's the one who stood with him by the Thestrals, after Sirius, who talked about the veil without flinching. With her, Harry's grief isn't something to move past, it's something to weave into who he becomes. This changes everything about how he carries his past. Each pairing highlights a different side of him. With Ginny, his playful, competitive streak gets center stage. He's the boy who smirks across the pitch, who loves a good dare, who can finally be young because someone else is willing to hex the idiots in the stands. With Luna, his philosophical questioning side comes forward. He's the man who will stay up too late wondering whether the Hallows were a lesson or a temptation, and she will answer with a story about her mother's experiments and a cup of tea. And both readings are valid. Both are love. This AU isn't about fixing canon or proving one ship superior. It's about asking, what if Harry's primary mirror was someone who shared his strangeness and his grief, instead of someone who brought him into a boisterous, grounding family he already had by adoption? So, let's explore your own answer for a moment. When you think of Harry's journey, what kind of healing feels truest to you? Setting down the wand for a quiet, crowded kitchen, or walking hand in hand with someone who sees the ghosts too? Which future would you fight to protect? Because in the next part of this timeline, we're going to see what that choice demands from everyone else. What changes, what stays, war, death, and destiny. Because in this part of the timeline, we have to ask a hard question. How much actually changes when Harry loves Luna, and how much of the war grinds on exactly the same? On the surface, the big machinery of canon barely blinks. Voldemort still rises. He still makes Horcruxes. Dumbledore still withers on borrowed time from that cursed ring. The cave, the green potion, the tower, those beats land. Snape still kills Dumbledore. Snape is still revealed as Lily's boy, double agent, tragic protector. The Battle of Hogwarts still erupts around midnight, giants and spiders and all. Harry still walks into the forest to die. That spine of the story is built out of Tom Riddle's choices, not Harry's crushes. This isn't a story about derailing prophecy with a kiss. The prophecy doesn't care who Harry loves. The war doesn't pause because he finds someone who can see Thestrals too. But because he does, the texture of nearly every major moment shifts. Take the Department of Mysteries. Canon Harry storms in, fueled by guilt and isolation. Here, he's still reckless, still 16, but Luna is the one person he'll actually listen to when she says, very calmly, "What if they want you to run?" Maybe they still go, maybe the trap still snaps shut. But that corridor by the veil, he doesn't stand there hollowed out and unreachable. He breaks in front of the one girl who already talks about death as a door, not a void. Means he starts grieving serious with language for loss, instead of just rage. That carries forward. Harry's coping mechanisms, post-Oot-P, skew less toward punching walls and more toward long, strange walks around the lake with Luna, arguing about whether souls curve. At Malfoy Manor, the rescue still happens, but the stakes torching. Luna in front of him is unbearable in a very specific way. It's not just, save my friend. It's you are hurting the person who keeps me choosing life. And then the forest walk. Externally, nothing changes. He still tells no one the full truth. He still holds the snitch, meets his parents, steps into the killing curse. Internally, he is not walking away from an abstract future. He is walking away from Luna's hand in his, from the possibility of a cottage with dirigible plums strangling the guttering and children who grow up hearing stories about Naggles and resistance in the same breath. That love doesn't stop the sacrifice. It makes it cost more and mean more. After the war, that cost echoes through the culture. Harry is still dragged into public life, but Luna standing beside him means his speeches are stranger and sharper. He talks about dementors and depression in the same sentence. He backs policies that protect inconvenient creatures and inconvenient people. He is less willing to let the Ministry bury Azkaban, or the Deathly Hallows, under euphemism. When Luna gently asks, "What if they're wrong again?" he actually pushes back. So, let's explore what that does to the next generation. Because if Harry and Luna raise children in that world, the epilogue you think you know, King's Cross, neat house, tidy jobs, starts to unravel in some very interesting ways. Meta moment. Why Harry Luna resonates with fans. Because here's the thing, this isn't just a sweet AU about Harry and Luna holding hands under the stars. This isn't a story about swapping Ginny for the quirky Ravenclaw and calling it a day. The reason Harry Luna hits so hard for so many people lives outside the timeline, in the readers who find themselves in her. A lot of fans grew up feeling what Luna feels, being the odd one at the edge of the group photo, talking about things no one else seems to notice, getting laughed at, or worse, quietly dismissed. In canon, Luna is underestimated and gently mocked, but she keeps showing up with this quiet, stubborn resilience. For readers who carried their own loony labels, pairing her with the protagonist isn't just cute. It feels like proof. Proof that someone who is strange and intense, and too much in all the wrong ways, can still be chosen, can still be loved. Harry Luna also scratches a different itch than the traditional school crush. Their connection is built on shared trauma and emotional understanding. They both see Thestrals. They both know what it means to hear whispers about dead parents and to have grief treated as an awkward inconvenience. When Luna talks to Harry about Sirius, she doesn't try to fix him. She just stands in the corridor and says, essentially, "I see your pain. I believe you. That isn't fireworks in a broom cupboard." That's two people whose scars recognize each other. And that changes everything for readers who are tired of love stories where attraction is all about popularity or conventional beauty. What if the most important romantic beat in the story isn't the big kiss in the common room, but the night Harry finally breaks down by the Thestrals and Luna just holds the silence with him? What if the fantasy isn't dating the school's star, but being fully understood in your worst moment? There's also a bigger cultural hunger here. We've had decades of the weird girl as the sidekick, the joke, the manic pixie who exists to fix the hero and then vanish. Harry Luna fanworks quietly revolt against that. They say, no, she isn't a phase, she's the future. Means he doesn't grow up and graduate to someone more socially acceptable. He builds a family with the person everyone else wrote off. Because of that, this ship has become a refuge for conversations about mental health, neurodivergence, and different ways of seeing the world. Fans project ADHD, autism, anxiety, depression onto Luna and Harry, and then ask, what if the chosen one's greatest strength is that he and his partner refuse to see those traits as defects? You get Fix, where Luna helps Harry name his panic attacks, where Harry protects Luna from being institutionalized for odd beliefs, where their home is full of coping strategies, sensory-safe magic, and kids taught that visions and daydreams are not shameful. Pattern interrupt. Notice how little of that is about wands and jewels. This isn't a story about giving Harry a quirky trophy wife. It's about rewriting who gets to be centered in a love story. In the end, the joy of this AU isn't only what it heals in Harry. It's the quiet, radical claim it makes that the strange, grieving, inconvenient girl at the edge of the frame deserves to be loved loudly, canon or not. So, let's explore what happens when the next generation grows up assuming that was always true, addressing objections. But would Harry really? So, let's pause here and address the thing some of you have probably been muttering for the last 10 minutes. But would Harry really fall in love with Luna? It's a fair question. It's also the exact kind of question that tells us where canon ends and where this what-if begins. First objection. Harry never fancied her. On the surface, true. He doesn't blush around her the way he does with Cho. He doesn't get the chest monster narration he has with Ginny. But because this isn't a story about copying canon beats, we go hunting for different seeds. Who is it that Harry invites into Dumbledore's army when almost no one takes her seriously? Who does he trust to fly with him to the Department of Mysteries? Who finds him after Sirius's death, stands with him among the Thestrals, and says calmly, "You heard them too, those voices beyond the veil." Without flinching from his grief, Canon Harry feels safe enough with Luna to be angry, to be silent, to be seen. That's not fireworks. That's foundation. In a timeline where he grows up Harry Weasley, already wired to notice the kid on the margins, because he was one those moments tilt, means he doesn't just think Luna's odd but kind. He thinks she's one of the only people who understands the dead don't go away just because adults stop talking about them. Attraction can grow from that kind of understanding, especially when you're 17 and the world keeps ending. Second objection. Luna is too weird for him. Too airy, too detached, too much. But Harry is the boy who talks to snakes, rides a hippogriff to rescue a condemned criminal, and hears Voldemort in his sleep. Growing up in a Weasley household that protects the odd and the loud in equal measure, he doesn't learn to fear weird. He learns that Percy's ambition, Fred and George's chaos, and Ginny's bat-bogey hexes all belong at the same table. This changes everything about how he reads Luna. Her radish earrings aren't a social liability. They're a visual cousin to Ron's maroon jumpers and Dad's rubber ducks. Third objection. Luna deserves someone better. Hidden inside that is the assumption that Harry is the prize and Luna is the consolation. But because this Harry is a war-scarred, poor, stubborn Weasley kid, he is not a trophy. He is another traumatized child who has seen too many bodies on too many floors. Luna doesn't need someone shinier. She needs someone who won't flinch when she says, "I think I'll see Mum again behind the veil," and who still comes back to the Burrow for Sunday dinner. He needs someone who can stand in a graveyard of friends and say, "We'll see them again," without using it as an excuse to stop fighting. Is that a stretch from canon? Of course, every ship is. The question isn't, is this word for word what Rowling wrote? The question is, does this emotional logic hold if we follow it honestly through the new timeline? This AU doesn't claim Harry and Luna were secretly soulmates in the background of every scene. It claims that if you nudge their starting positions, if Harry grows up braver about tenderness and Luna is given more narrative room, then romance is a believable next step, not a genre twist. So, let's explore that step instead of dismissing it on sight. Even if you're skeptical, stay with the thought experiment. Watch what happens to the Department of Mysteries, to Dumbledore's army, to the Horcrux hunt when the girl everyone called Loony becomes the person Harry chooses to walk beside. If by the end it still doesn't ring true for you, that's fine, but you might be surprised how much canon quietly agrees with us. Viewer's choice. Scenes you'd rewrite first. So now that you've seen one possible Harry-Luna timeline play out, press pause in your head for a second. If you could reach into canon and change just one scene into a Harry-Luna moment, where would your hand land? Would you start at the Yule Ball, pull Harry away from that awkward bench, and have Luna appear in those silver star earrings, utterly unbothered by his fame and his 2 left feet? What if she was the first person who said, very calmly, "You don't have to enjoy this, you know." And he laughed, really laughed, because someone finally gave him permission not to perform? Or is it the DA meetings for you, when they're already growing up side by side? Imagine a version where we linger on Harry watching Luna demonstrate a spell. Her Patronus flickers into being, strange and luminous, and he realizes he's not just grateful for her belief in him as a leader, he's drawn to the way she believes in everyone. This changes everything for how he sees himself as a teacher, and as a boy who might be allowed to want something for himself. Maybe you'd go darker. The astronomy tower. The forest walk. What if, in your rewrite, Luna is the one who finds him on the tower stairs after Dumbledore falls, steadying him with a hand that doesn't tremble? Or she's the last person he speaks to before he walks into the forest, not to stop him, but to tell him that love doesn't end at the veil, and neither does courage. Means he carries her words with him alongside his parents' faces. Pattern interrupt. What if you ignore school entirely and jump past the war? Picture Luna knocking on the door of Privet Drive one last time, post-war, because she's decided the house that tried to erase Harry needs to see who he became. Or a quieter future where they're co-teaching defense at Hogwarts, Luna calmly pinning up a diagram of Thestrals, while Harry confiscates a fanged frisbee from a terrified first year. And then there are the AUs within the AU. What if Luna had been in Gryffindor, thrown straight into the Weasley chaos from day one? What if she met Harry before Hogwarts through the Quibbler? Because Xenophilius insisted on interviewing the boy who lived, and Molly refused to let him go alone. This isn't a story about finding the one correct version. It's a sandbox full of emotional truths you can test from different angles. So, let's explore together. In the comments, tell me which single canon scene would you rewrite first into a Harry-Luna moment, and why? Be specific. Walk us through the beats. Treat the comment section as a shared room of requirement, where this pairing can take 100 different shapes, and we can see what those shapes reveal about Harry, about Luna, and about the kind of love that might have protected them both. Lessons from the AU. What Harry-Luna reveals about canon Harry. And here's the twist. When we zoom back out from all those Harry-Luna scenes, we're not actually learning something new about Luna. We're learning something we keep forgetting about Harry. This isn't a story about swapping Ginny for the quirky girl in radish earrings. It's a story about how easily Harry's arc bends to hold a romance rooted in shared grief and strangeness. Think about how little we have to change. Canon Harry already stands with Luna by the Thestrals, already listens to her talk about her mother's death, already lets her see him shattered after Sirius falls through the veil. What if we just stay there longer? The fact that the timeline can absorb a romance built on loss and oddity without breaking means he was always more boy-carved by grief than Seeker of the Century. The AU doesn't overwrite Quidditch. It just reminds us that the real through line of his growing up is funerals, not trophies. It also throws a spotlight on something Harry rarely gets to say out loud: his hunger to be seen beyond the scar and the prophecy. Canon gives us flashes, him hating the attention in Diagon Alley, snapping at Scrimgeour, bristling when Slughorn collects him. But because we're used to the Chosen One as a narrative device, we underestimate how exhausting that is. A Harry-Luna romance exaggerates the moments where she looks straight past the legend to the boy who can see Thestrals and doesn't know how to talk about it. Means he isn't just relieved, he's starving for that kind of gaze. And whether or not he ever marries her, the sheer plausibility of the pairing tells us something crucial. Harry craves emotional safety and understanding. More than he craves fireworks, the boy who dates Cho and ends up comforting her. The boy who falls for Ginny after she becomes someone who will tease him, fly with him, and still sit quietly when the nightmares get bad. Plug Luna into that pattern, and it doesn't feel alien, it feels inevitable. Of course, the child who grew up unwanted would gravitate toward the girl who makes being unwanted look almost bearable. Reimagining his love life becomes a tool, a way to notice what we skim past in canon. His friendships with Ron and Hermione, where he rarely confides his deepest fears. His coping mechanisms, anger, isolation, reckless heroics, standing in contrast to Luna's gentle, bizarre acceptance of death. When she talks about seeing her mother again beyond the veil, it reframes Harry's relationship to mortality, to the Hallows, to that walk into the forest. This changes everything about how we read his final sacrifice, even if not a single canon kiss moves. So, let's explore the real function of shipping here. Sometimes the value of a ship isn't in winning canon, but in the way it illuminates hidden truths about characters we thought we already knew. And if Harry-Luna can do that for one boy with a scar, what happens when we turn that same lens on the rest of this Weasley-raised timeline? Lessons from the AU, what it reveals about Luna as a delightful side character, and instead ask, what if the story had to take her heart seriously? Not just her radish earrings, not just her nargles, her wants, her fears, her decisions. Giving Luna a romance arc with Harry forces the camera to linger on her interior world. In canon, we glimpse it in flashes: the missing shoes, the stolen portraits of her friends, the way she stares at the veil with quiet understanding. In this timeline, those moments become the groundwork for desire and insecurity. How does a girl who has been mocked for years handle the terror of being chosen by the chosen one? Does she worry he'll wake up one day and realize he could have had someone more conventionally brilliant, more conventionally admired? This isn't a story about Luna fixing Harry with whimsy. It's about two traumatized teenagers trying to believe they deserve to be loved at all. That shift also sharpens her boundaries. The manic pixie dream girl reading of Luna depends on her being infinitely available, infinitely forgiving, infinitely odd on command. But because this AU asks what she needs from Harry, we see the edges. She will stay up with him by the Thestrals when nightmares hit, yes, but she will also say, very calmly, that she will not be his secret or his distraction from grief. She will walk away from a fight rather than be treated as a safe dumping ground for his anger. She is kind, not endlessly absorbent. Pairing her with Harry also reframes her courage. In canon, it's easy to file her under quirky Ravenclaw, who shows up at the Department of Mysteries. Here, standing beside Harry in the Ministry or at Hogwarts means she's not a sidekick. She's a co-strategist. She is the one who says, "We may die tonight. You know that, don't you?" And then holds his gaze until he says it back. Means he doesn't face death with blind Gryffindor recklessness, but with Luna's unnerving moral clarity humming at his side. And yet, even in love, Luna drifts. She goes chasing crumple-horned Snorkax, or disappears into the archives of the Quibbler, or spends 3 days helping Neville replant a greenhouse because the plants asked nicely. A healthy Harry-Luna relationship in this timeline has to make room for that holy restlessness. Harry learns that protecting someone doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means waving them off at the train station and trusting they'll come back. The deeper truth, though, is that even here Luna's worth is not measured by whose hand she's holding in the epilogue. This changes everything about how we can read her in canon. She is already a person who could alter the entire course of someone's life if loved well. Friend, partner, or something in between. The ship just makes that power impossible to ignore. And if centering Luna reveals that much, what happens when we turn the same spotlight on Harry Weasley himself and ask how loving her reshapes his choices in the war? Closing the loop, back to the Thestrals. Let's explore what happens when we close the loop and walk back to where this all began. The edge of the Forbidden Forest. The night Sirius falls through the veil. And Harry stumbles out to the Thestrals because he cannot bear the castle. Canon gives us a Harry who is brittle with grief, kicking at the ground, refusing to speak. In this timeline, the image is the same at first: the skeletal wings, the hollow eyes, the moonlight turning bone silver. But because Harry Weasley has grown up wrapped in burrow noise and Weasley hugs, the dam doesn't quite hold. When Luna appears, barefoot in the grass, he doesn't shut down. He cracks. He tells her the thing he can't tell Ron yet, that he wanted to go through the veil after Sirius, that a small, terrible part of him still does. Luna listens, quiet and steady, fingers resting on a Thestral's neck, as if she's done this 100 times. She tells him about her mother's death, about hearing the rushing in his ears and thinking it was the world ending. Means he isn't the only one whose life cleaved into a before and an after. This isn't a story about Luna magically fixing Harry's grief. It's about that moment planting a seed. Two teenagers, both able to see death, discovering that they can also see each other. The Thestrals become their first shared language, the proof that the worst thing that ever happened to you doesn't make you unlovable, just visible to someone else who understands. Now jump years ahead. The war is over. The scar is just a scar. Harry and Luna are married, older, soft around the edges in that way people get when they've survived and then chosen to keep living. They bring their children to the forest on a crisp autumn evening with Hagrid's blessing and an emergency stash of rock cakes. One of the kids can see the Thestrals, one can't. The third is squinting very hard and insisting they can, which is exactly the kind of stubborn Weasley Lovegood energy you'd expect. There's a moment of awkward silence, the kind you only get in a family that loves each other enough to risk honesty. Then Harry kneels, explains gently what it means, that seeing them isn't a punishment or a curse. It's a sign you've walked through something hard and kept going. For him, the sight of those wings is no longer just the memory of Sirius falling. It's Luna's hand finding his in the grass. It's DA meetings, the Department of Mysteries, the Horcrux hunt, all the times her strange, luminous calm called him back from the edge. This changes everything about the symbol. Thestrals aren't just heralds of death in this timeline. They're the first witnesses of a love story. As the herd shifts in the shadows, Luna leans her head on Harry's shoulder and says, almost conversationally, that she's glad they could both see them, because it meant, in the end, that they could see each other too. And if that's true, what does it mean for the choices Harry Weasley makes when death comes calling again? Big picture, love, death, and the stories we tell. It means the Thestrals aren't just spooky background creatures in this timeline. They're a thesis statement. This isn't a story about love swooping in to erase everything awful that's ever happened to Harry Weasley. In this what if, love doesn't cure trauma. It makes it survivable. Death doesn't stop stalking Harry and Luna. It walks beside them from the first time they touch those skeletal necks to the last time Harry faces the killing curse. But because they can see death, they can talk about it. They can name it. They can decide together that it will not have the final word on who they become. That's the big picture of this AU. Being loved doesn't mean Harry stops having nightmares or Luna stops hearing her father's printing press at night in the silence. It means he has someone who will sit with him on the roof of the burrow when he can't sleep. It means she has someone who will help her pin up Quibbler pages and quietly separate the conspiracy theories from the grief. Being seen in your strangeness becomes a form of salvation, not a miracle, a practice. Canon has always told us that love is the power Voldemort can't understand. Usually we read that through Lily's sacrifice, through Harry's willingness to walk into the forest, through Ginny as the normal girl who shows him he can have a life after war. Harry Luna is just another way of turning that same prism. What if the love Voldemort can't understand is not only sacrificial, but also profoundly odd? What if it's a boy raised in a crowded kitchen and a girl who believes in Nargles, choosing each other because they're both a bit out of step with the world? This changes everything on the surface. Who dates whom, who kisses whom after Quidditch, who stands next to Harry in the Great Hall. But it doesn't change the moral core. He still wins because he refuses to become a tyrant. He still lives because he walks willingly toward death. Means he is still Harry Potter, even when he is Harry Weasley, even when he is Harry who loves Luna. And that's the quiet magic of fan AUs. They let us pull at the threads of canon and see which ones snap and which ones hold. You swap Ginny for Luna, you nudge Cho's arc, you give Neville a different confidant, and then you ask, does the story about love and death still stand? Or have we broken something essential? Here's the pattern interrupt. Sometimes, changing the romance makes the theme feel truer. For some of you, Harry and Luna grieving together by the Thestrals will land harder than Harry and Ginny kissing in an empty classroom. For others, this timeline will be an intriguing branch you visit, and then gently set aside in favor of Rowling's epilogue. Both responses are valid. Both tell you something about what you need from this story. So let's explore this AU not as a fix-it, but as a conversation. What if we keep asking these questions, not because canon failed, but because we want to know it better, because every new branch of the timeline throws the original into sharper relief. From here, we're going to trace how that plays out in specific moments: day meetings, Hallow's choices, the final walk into the forest, and see what changes when the person Harry looks back at one last time is Luna. Soft landing. What if they're just friends? And if the person he looks back at one last time is Luna, we also have to ask something quieter. What if he never looks back at her that way? What if all of this intensity, all of this potential, stays exactly where canon leaves it, as one of the strangest, softest friendships Harry ever has? This isn't a story about saying, they must be in love or it doesn't count. If anything, Harry and Luna prove the opposite. Even without romance, their canon relationship is one of the most quietly profound connections in the series, because it's built on empathy and honesty in a world that runs on secrets and performance. Harry doesn't have to impress her. Luna doesn't have to pretend she isn't hurt. They meet each other in the raw. Think about the end of Order of the Phoenix. Everyone else is giving Harry space, or tiptoeing around him because they're terrified of saying the wrong thing about Sirius. Luna just talks. She mentions her mother. She mentions the veil. She doesn't flinch from death, and she doesn't flinch from Harry's anger. That scene by the notice board is small on the page, but it changes everything about how Harry carries his grief. He walks away not fixed, but less alone. Or that awkward, oddly tender moment when he invites her to Slughorn's Christmas party. He could ignore her. He could worry about what people will say. Instead, he sees her standing there, radish earrings and all, and asks, means he chooses to be seen with the girl everyone calls Loony, and he does it without making it a grand moral gesture. It's just Harry, being decent, because he remembers the girl who talked to him about Sirius when no one else would. Then there's the DA. In the room of requirement, Luna isn't comic relief. She's infrastructure. She's the one who believes in him loudly, who pins hand-drawn posters to the walls, who walks into the Department of Mysteries because he asks, and because she trusts him. Their teamwork there, fighting side by side, both able to see Thestrals, both pulled toward the unknown behind the veil, means their bond is literally battle-tested before any AU romance even begins. So, let's explore a slightly different what-if. What if the most radical thing this story does is let a boy and a girl understand each other this deeply, without it turning into a kiss? Canon Harry Luna gives us that. It protects the idea that not every soul-deep connection has to be a love story in the traditional sense. Sometimes, the miracle is that they stay exactly what they are, which means our AU isn't a correction, it's a branch. One possible timeline growing out of that friendship, not the only valid destination. You don't have to reject canon to love this ship. You can hold both. The text where he names his daughter Lily Luna, honoring a friend who saw him, and the thought experiment, where that name carries a different, sharper ache. Because once we've honored what's on the page, we're ready to ask the next question: if you do nudge that friendship towards something more, where, exactly, does the world start to tilt? Recap: the AU in one breath. So, let's explore what that tilt actually did to the timeline. In one long breath. This isn't a story about Harry randomly waking up in 6th year and deciding the girl with the butterbeer cork necklace is his manic pixie dream witch. The divergence is quieter, earlier and sharper. It starts when he notices Luna in Order of the Phoenix not just as Loony, but as the only other student who can see the Thestrals. Means he doesn't walk away from that first carriage ride and forget her. He circles back. He asks, "Who did you see die?" and actually waits for the answer. From there, the Thestral paddock becomes their recurring meeting place. After Sirius falls through the veil, it isn't a half conversation on a staircase. It's Harry breaking properly in front of the skeletal horses and Luna staying with him until the sun comes up. She talks about her mother. He talks about the flashes of green light he can't remember and the godfather he barely got to know. Because someone finally names death without flinching, his grief has somewhere to land. This changes everything. The DA shifts first. In canon, it's a club. Here, it's a crucible where Harry and Luna's odd, intense partnership is just there. She's the one he pairs with when the nightmares are bad. She's the one who quietly suggests teaching a shield charm that can hold against more than hexes, because she's been listening to Order members talk at the kitchen door. Their hands brush over wands and parchment, and the room notices before they do. Then the milestones start firing. The ministry battle still happens, but now Harry checks for Luna first when the dust settles. After Dumbledore dies, the Thestrals carry them both back from the funeral. They ride in silence, sharing the same terrible view of the sky. Slughorn's Christmas party stops being a half-hearted date with a friend and turns into the night Harry realizes Luna, in dress robes, is not an abstract concept, but a problem he will never emotionally recover from. At Malfoy Manor, Harry's desperation isn't just about rescuing a friend. When Bellatrix takes Luna, the calm, suicidal fury that rises in him is different from canon. Shell Cottage becomes the place they say the quiet things, that they're both tired of funerals, that if one of them doesn't make it, the other has to go on anyway. The Forest Walk is the same and not. He still means to die. But because he's walking toward Voldemort while remembering Luna's belief that death is a door, not an end, he's less martyr, more pilgrim. He comes back, not just for the world, but for the girl who will absolutely tell him off if he throws his life away twice. And the epilogue, the names on the platform change, but the feeling doesn't. Harry and Luna parent children who grow up knowing that fear can be spoken aloud, and that oddness is a kind of wisdom. Ginny's fire goes into Quidditch glory and a different love. Cho finds someone who isn't a storm in human form. Ron and Hermione still orbit each other, but with less resentment about always being second to the chosen one, because Harry's attention has been elsewhere for years. Neville, mentored by both of them, grows into a professor who teaches that courage and gentleness are the same spell, cast two ways. The war is still won, but the post-war world is softer at the edges. A Harry who processed trauma beside someone who understands Thestrals uses his influence to protect the overlooked, while a Luna, whose oddness was honored as truth, becomes the conscience of a ministry that would rather forget. In this timeline, the girl who saw Thestrals with Harry also got to see him grow old, and he finally believed he was allowed to. Call to action, your turn in the Department of Mysteries. In the end, it comes back to something very small. A boy, a girl, and a corridor full of invisible horses only they can see. A whispered what if between the wing beats. So now it's your turn in the Department of Mysteries. If you could reach into canon and change just one moment, which scene would you rewrite as a Harry Luna moment? Not a full episode, not a whole year. One precise point on the timeline. Would you put her in the hospital wing after the graveyard, letting him say he came back to someone who already believes impossible things? Would you send her to the lake after the second task, wand held high and radish earrings dripping, to say one line that changes everything? Tell me the scene, and then give me one sentence of dialogue you'd add. One line you wish Harry said to Luna, or Luna said to Harry, that would echo through this whole AU. Because this isn't a story about replacing canon so much as listening for the conversations that could have been hiding between the lines. And if you're a fan creator, this is your flu call. If there was a moment in this timeline that grabbed you, take it and run. Maybe you want to draw Luna's face when Harry's Patronus shifts, antlers dissolving into something winged. Maybe you want to write the night before the Department of Mysteries, when he almost tells her not to come, and she comes anyway. Maybe you're already cutting together a vid where Luna Lovegood becomes the one person he can't bear to lose. This changes everything, but it doesn't have to change in just one way. If you still prefer Harry Ginny or your ride or die for canon ships, that's fine. The question I'd love you to sit with is this: what did this AU change about how you see Harry or how you see Luna? Does imagining him growing up with someone who names her possessions and believes in Nargles make his anger softer around the edges? Does watching her stand beside the Chosen One in battle, not flinching from Thestrals or from death, make her feel less whimsical and more inevitable? Because this isn't a story about being right about ships. It's a story about what happens when love and grief speak the same strange language. If you want more deep dive what-ifs into the wizarding world, more timelines where one small decision tilts the whole war, go ahead and subscribe and share this with the friend who still argues about Horcruxes versus Hallows. It means we get to keep this conversation going. It means we get to keep protecting these characters from flat readings and keep discovering new ways their growing up could have gone. So, let's explore one last image together. A quiet stretch of forest, two students, and the rustle of wings. In one world, they walk past each other, almost strangers. In this one, their hands brush, and he dares to ask, "Do you see them too?" The Thestrals are still there. The war is still real. But because he asked, and because she answered, the what-if never quite closes. It just keeps flying, just out of sight, waiting for you to follow.